Give me big old buckets of butter beer. Give me big old barrels of butter beer. Give me the drink I love so dear. And another round for my friend right here of the sweet old butter beer.
Welcome to the Three Broomsticks. We invite you to pull up a chair, grab a butterbeer, and settle in for a hearty discussion about Harry Potter. I'm Sierra Obermark, and Irvin will be with us in just a little bit. He had to help a neighbor, which we can't really argue with. So I am here for the time being to help introduce our guests for today. Our first guest is our very own Patrick. Yay, Patrick!
Yay! Hello, everybody. Thank you for welcoming me on to the Three Broomsticks. I was originally supposed to be on episode 26. Listeners may remember that was the episode where we were going to have the whole team on for the first time, and I was actually scheduled to be on with you guys while you were recording. And a few days before that, I found out that I was diagnosed with leukemia, and I was in the hospital for 11 days and have been undergoing treatment since then. And I thank you guys for mentioning that on the episode. It was very nice of you to do so. And I've had... For those of you who don't know me and aren't unfamiliar with my work here at Three Broomsticks or with Alohomora, which I have been the editor of Alohomora for the last 13 years and the editor of Three Broomsticks since it started. I've edited every episode except for episode 26, which was graciously taken over and edited. I don't know if we've said it on a show yet, but Aurelia was the one that edited that episode. So I want to just go on public record right now to thank Aurelia for editing the first episode that I have failed to edit in the 13 years that I've been editing Harry Potter podcasts. So I think she did a great job, though. And I know it was a lot of work for her. And it was something that was very different because she's done a little editing here and there. But I think she did a fantastic job. And I want to say thank you, Aurelia, for stepping in and filling in for me. That was really amazing that she was able to do that.
Yeah, that was really great. Thanks, Aurelia. We love you.
And so if anybody's listening and if you've been following Alohomora over the years, if you've been following Three Broomsticks for the last year, thank you very much for doing so. Whenever I get a chance to be on an episode of anything, I always want to take the opportunity to thank the people who listen, the people who are part of our Patreon, which we'll get into that in a little bit. But seriously, thank you for listening. Thank you for doing all of the spreading of the word, as we say at the end of every episode. Word of mouth does really help shows like this, especially as we're still in the beginning stages, even though we've been here for a year. I also want to just tell everybody, a little bit personally, since I was diagnosed with leukemia, if you've been following Alohomora and you've been with me on my Harry Potter journey over the last 13 years, treatment has been going really great. I've been in and out of the hospital constantly since I was released. And, we've been doing chemotherapy, all sorts of different things here and there, and everything's going really great. And I had an appointment today. I was at the hospital for most of the day today and I got to see my doctor again. And we were looking at everything, and it looks like a vast majority of the cancer is gone already. I have very little of it left in my bone marrow, which is great. And so we're going to keep going with treatment. And as long as it keeps going this way, I get to slowly dwindle things down, take less steroids, because boy, am I taking a whole ton of steroids, which is a form of chemotherapy, which I did not know, but that's kind of interesting. But anyway, so everything's going really great. So nobody worry. No shows will be affected by this. And I just, like a lot of people who listen to these shows, when I was diagnosed, it was a bummer and everything. But when I got back home and I was allowed to start working on things again, and I got to edit episode 27 of Three Broomsticks, it was just such a comfort to me. And so it was, and also just listening to episode 26 was a comfort too. I was having a bad day that day, and I threw on episode 26 to listen to it, and I was like, I get it. I get why people listen to this. I've been editing these things for years and years, and I'm not really even a big podcast consumer myself. I'm much more of a visual person, but I get it now. I get why these things are important to people and why they can help you make it through a difficult day. And so I just think that's great. And so I wanted to just let all the listeners know again, thank you very much for listening to this show. Thank you for listening to Alohomora over the years. I'm still the editor of Alohomora as well. I'm one of those crazy crossover people. It's almost like DC and Marvel are coming together for the first time here. But it's all the same at the end of the day. We're all here because we love Harry Potter, and we're here specifically today because we like Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, which is really awesome. And so now I know, since this is my first episode of Three Broomsticks, and we do have another guest on this episode, by the way, we'll get to her in a second. But since this is my first episode, and there might be people who are unfamiliar with my sort of Harry Potter story, I want to get into that a little bit. Also, I'm trying to burn some time while we're waiting for Irvin as well. So just to let the listeners know that. But I am a Ravenclaw. So Sierra, you are what?
I'm a Hufflepuff.
Oh, you're Hufflepuff. Okay, and then Irvin's Hufflepuff, and our guest we'll get to in a second. So we'll hold off on that one. You guys will find that out. Drum roll for the next 5 minutes while I talk. So I'm a Ravenclaw, and my journey to Harry Potter is similar to a lot of people's. I was a kid who didn't like to read, and I had my mother started reading me the Harry Potter books, and I couldn't wait to read them anymore, so I had to pick them up and read them myself. And the Harry Potter books got me into reading, which is something that I love to do to this day. And I started pretty early on. I think only the first 3 books had been out at that point. I was definitely before the movies came out, and it was, just something that I fell into really hard. And I absolutely credit the Harry Potter books for getting me to read and become a significantly more intellectual person, because I was one of them really dumb kids. So I really, really appreciate the Harry Potter books and the path that they've set me on to continue to enjoy loving reading to this day. And a contemporary of Harry Potter, of course, the Percy Jackson books. I love those books. I've at times, while I was reading them and in the height of the emotions of those books, considered them to be even better than the Harry Potter books, which I know is kind of a crazy thing to say in our sphere of people. But I get really attached to things and really emotionally connected to them when I'm like consuming them. And it's like I go all in on it. And so I really like the Percy Jackson books. My favorite characters for both series are the main characters. I guess I'm kind of a basic Bob in that regard, but I love
main character syndrome.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm okay with it. I love Harry. I love Percy. I love both of them have a saving people thing. And I love that. And I'm not one of those people that necessarily, I don't necessarily relate to things very much when I'm reading them. I definitely think of things from a third-person perspective, and I think that lends itself towards the way I approach things like music and creativity and things. I'm much more of a, when I watch a movie, I watch it for the special effects and for this camera movement was so incredible. Look at that transition was incredible. Not necessarily like, I really relate to this person. And so I admire the bravery and I admire the decision-making and I admire all of the things that Harry and Percy both do in their respective series. And that's one of the reasons they're my favorite characters. Though I do really like a lot of the minor characters as well. And I'm sure I'll get to talk about those throughout the episode. But my favorite book in the Percy Jackson series, my favorite Harry Potter book, as anyone who's ever heard me on a Harry Potter thing will know, is by far Order of the Phoenix. I've always loved Order of the Phoenix. I think the Dumbledore's Army thing is one of my absolute favorite things I've ever gotten to experience in any medium. I think In the Hog's Head is my favorite chapter of the Harry Potter books when they form the DA and they get, it's so rare in a book where the main character gets to have adulation, poured on them from the other characters. And it's such a cool, special thing we get in that scene. And so I love Order of the Phoenix. Now, I saw in the doc, it was like, what's your favorite Percy Jackson book? And that was a little bit more difficult for me because it's been a while since I've read the books, but I have read the books multiple times. And I mentioned before we even started recording that I've read the second set of 5, The Heroes of Olympus. I've read that more recently than I have read the Percy Jackson and the Olympians. But the book that stuck out to me the most while I was just looking at them, and I've got all my books right here with me, the book that stuck out the most to me is The Titan's Curse. I really like the middle one.
Yes!
But I don't know if I would say it was my favorite because I am a sucker for a good battle. And the last book is basically a giant battle. And so I really like The Last Olympian as well because that's what it's called, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. I really like the 5th book I just think of them as the numbers. I really like that book as well because I remember feeling very satisfied when it was done. And that's not something that every series at the time that was a contemporary, because I remember being even more so than the Percy Jackson books, I was really into the Pendragon books. And boy, let me tell you, a disappointing ending that series had, in my opinion.
Oh, yep.
In my opinion.
Can confirm.
Right. And so, but I remember being very satisfied and like thinking that it was a very epic feel to the last book. And I just want to reiterate one thing that I think Sierra said in the first Percy Jackson episode. I really think that Rick Riordan's writing gets much better as the books go on. And I feel like the second set of 5, if anyone's listening to this and you've just read the first set of 5, I just want to throw it out there and say, please continue reading this series.
So worth it.
It's absolutely
and I'm
worth
going
it.
to say don't.
Right. Everybody's got their own opinions. Irvin and my opinions differ on a lot of things in life in general, as much as humanly possible. So this could be a very fun episode. But we should also mention, while I've been talking, we took a tiny break because, hey, everybody, Irvin's here.
Hello.
Yay!
Hi. Yes, I've made it.
So just to finish up, I think my favorite Percy Jackson book is the last one, but I really have an affinity for the third book. And my favorite scene in all of the Percy Jackson books is when they go to that dam and they get the damn fries with the damn burger. It makes me laugh every single time.
Yes.
And it's just iconic. So, and I recently just last night finished watching the show, and I think we'll talk about the show a little bit later, but I personally loved the show. It took a few episodes for me to get into it and to become okay with the casting of everybody, but I grew into it, and by the end, I was cheering everybody on. So
We're going to have a lot to discuss.
Yep. We'll have a lot to discuss.
Oh my God.
I just saw Irvin's face.
So that's me.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Patrick. That is I think, this is going to be a really great discussion, and we're going to have so many opinions here. And the next opinion that we would love to hear from is our second guest, Mayuri, who is here, and we are so excited to have you. Could you give us your little intro, how you got to Potter and Hogwarts House and all of that fun stuff, including the Percy Jackson information?
Yes. Thank you for having me on again. I love doing these. I am a born, bred, proud Slytherin, tattoo to match and everything. So
Ooh.
I started reading Potter right before the first movie came out. So over 20 years ago for us oldies. And I kind of devoured all the books in one summer. And similar to Patrick, I didn't really read before Harry Potter. I just kind of faked it in school. Like, I never read Animal Farm, still to this day. I just pretended to read all the books they told us to and just bluffed my way through all the tests.
Oh, hell yeah. Spark Notes? I was all about that.
Yes, I used to go to Office Depot and buy the Spark Notes with my chore money. But yeah, so I started reading. My favorite character from the beginning has always been Draco. Always Draco from book 1, from 20 years ago. I used to get highly ridiculed for that opinion. Now it's popular. It is very popular opinion. But 20 years ago, it was extremely unpopular.
What circles did you run in 20 years ago? Because let me tell you, in my circles 20 years ago, that was a pretty popular opinion.
I ran with a bunch of, Gryffindors. They were they were all about Harry and the black and white, and they did not appreciate the gray like I did at age 14.
I am so sorry.
Okay, my favorite book has been, always will be, including my favorite movie, is Prisoner of Azkaban. The introduction of the Marauders and Sirius Black, Remus Lupin. Snape's pettiness has always been like the best for me. So, to the point where I actually got like a custom pair of sneakers from work. And they were like, oh yeah, you can embroider anything you want on the side of the sneaker. And I was like, $3.94, please. So my
Love it.
So my
That's
sneakers
amazing.
have $3.94 embroidered on the side because that is the level of petty that I aspire to be.
Fair enough.
I love it.
With Percy, I had a little bit of a different journey than most people. I was so far into Harry Potter 20 years ago, that Percy Jackson was not even a blip to me. I had no idea that it existed until the movies came out. And isn't that such a sad thing? I watched the movies and enjoyed them. They were bad, but I enjoyed them, you know?
You can separate it out.
Logan Lerman
I mean, they're fun movies.
Yeah,
Like,
Logan Lerman's great.
But I did, and that's when I first heard about Percy Jackson, the books. And I didn't really read them or anything. I was like, oh, these movies were kind of, like, they were enjoyable, but quite awful. And I kind of left it at that. And then a little bit more than a year ago, like December of 22, I ran out of things to read. I'd been rereading fan fiction for ages, and I was just like, I want to stay in this kind of genre. And so I heard the rumor that the show was getting made. So I was like, well, let me read these books, I guess. Cue to a month later, I had read all the way through Magnus Chase.
Wow.
Literally.
Yes.
Someone was like, how many books did you read? I was like, I don't know, 13 or 15, something like that. There was a lot of them. I don't really have other things, so I like just spend my time reading and making Lego. So I got really into Percy very quickly. And as such, I haven't reread them yet. Because I just did my Sarah J. Maas reread, and that was intense. But I love them. Love them. And was really, really excited for the show. So again, I read them all kind of condensed in 1 month. And so they kind of blurred together for me, to be honest. But I remember enjoying Labyrinth, because one of my favorite things about some of these books is that everything is kind of layered under real world United States.
Yes.
And so it's like I could be somewhere and like, this place actually exists, like is a place I can go to. And hey, it's in Percy Jackson, which means that Percy Jackson could be real. We're just not demigods.
yeah.
This is why I also loved Harry Potter when I was younger, because theoretically, it could have been real. We're just muggles, so we don't know about it.
Speak for yourself. Rude.
But yeah, so I remember enjoying The Labyrinth because it was kind of just like not expected. I was reading it and I was like, WTF is going on? They're just in a giant maze. And just random things happening. And then, of course, my favorite character is Nico. A very morally gray, ambiguous character. And I actually put a note, and I meant to say because I've read through, my second favorite character was so randomly Bob the Titan. From
Hey, he's cool.
I was just like, oh, Bob, like, we love you.
Yeah.
Like, he was very, like, Grop to me. So I was like,
That's fantastic. I love that.
Yeah. Sierra, do we maybe want to talk about our own Percy Jackson favorites and journeys and all of that?
I think that's a great idea. Let us do it. Do you want to go first?
Sure. So my favorite book is Titan's Curse, obviously, because it is just the clearly best one. Like, I think 3 of the 4 of us here are in complete agreement on how absolutely perfect Titan's Curse is. Sorry, spoiler alert for Sierra's favorite. And my favorite character is Talia. Like, I love her so much, but also, like, Luke. I really, really love Luke. And, like, I don't generally go for, like, the bad boy, like, anti-heroes or whatever, but, like, Luke, guys, like, he's so tortured, and also, he's so right about everything.
I mean, he is quite right.
Yeah.
Yes. he has some very valid points.
He does. And so I came to Percy Jackson like way before it was cool. I got into it when only the first 3 books were out. So only Lightning Thief, Sea of Monsters, Titan's Curse, because I think a friend gave them to me for my 16th birthday. And I remember I went to Barnes & Noble the day Battle of the Labyrinth came out. And I was like, hey, like I'm looking for this new book. It just came out today. And the bookseller had no clue. They're like, Battle by who now? Like, I'll check in the back if we have a copy.
Oh my gosh.
And like, now every time I like walk into a bookstore and see like, you know, the Rick Riordan book cases, like not shelves, but cases. I was like, yeah, we've come a long way. So I was really, really into Percy Jackson. And then Heroes of Olympus really, really did not do it for me. I stayed with Percy Jackson. I read The Red Pyramid, the first Egyptian book, and like was not impressed. So dropped that. But then I read through Heroes of Olympus and just like could not stand them. And so when the last one was coming out, I did a whole big reread, like from the beginning to the end, so I could like see how it all like deteriorated so rapidly. So just after Blood of Olympus, Rick Riordan and I had a clean break. It's not me, it's him. And so, yeah, I pretty much want nothing more to do with, like, the wider Riordan verse. But the original 5, like, the original 5 Percy Jackson books, I've read and reread, and I just think they are so good and so wonderful and absolutely hold up.
So you've not read Magnus Chase?
I have not read Magnus Chase. I have not read the Apollo ones, even though people kept giving me free copies of the first one. I think I had like 3 at one point.
Oh my gosh.
I might one day, you know, with time, as the glasses become rose tinted. But
does not seem like that's going to be anytime soon.
Maybe not.
I won't lie. Part of the Magnus Chase thing that appealed to me is that it's based in Boston, and I live in Boston, and so there are just like random scenes that I'm just like, that's such a Boston thing to do. It's like, we can't stay here and search long because we'll run out of parking. It's like, yes, avoid that ticket at all costs.
That's really funny, actually. Hey, whatever it takes to get you to connect with something.
That is true.
Let's hope Rick Riordan keeps writing books and he could eventually write one set in Nebraska. Yeah, that's a setting everyone wants to read about.
Everybody wants books set in Nebraska.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. My favorite book, as Irvin spoiled, is also Titan's Curse. My main reason is, I'm just going to go ahead. Pre-spoiler warning for all 5 of the original Percy Jacksons, because I'm about to get into it. So, warning, spoilers. I love the whole shifting from Annabeth to Percy of the weight, and that entire sequence of everybody that it shifts to, and how they trick or not trick each other to be the one to hold the weight. I just, that always, like the first time I read it through, I was like, I need to reread this. And then I read it again. And I think I read that scene 3 times. And then I even went back to Percy's dream with Luke tricking Annabeth into taking the weight at the beginning, just to like get one clear picture of all of the characters who end up being a part of this. And that just, it's always stuck with me. Like anytime I think about the original 5 Percy Jackson books, that's like the biggest scene that stands out in my head of like why these books are really great. So that's kind of my main thing. And favorite characters, really hard for me to pick. I usually am not a main character person, but Percy's sass is just so next level, and the sarcasm and the silly jokes and the chapter titles even really just you can't become supreme lord of the bathroom. I mean, how can you get better than that? So he's always been like pretty top notch for me, and my co-favorites would be Nico as well, and also Luke, for many of the reasons that everybody else talked about, which is, you know, they kind of have the morally gray, they have good points. I think that they both have great antagonist moments, but also just all those redeeming qualities that you want in a traitor, antagonist, kid who's finding himself type of character. So those have been my top for me. And then how I got into Percy Jackson. So I think the first episode, I kind of touched on this, but I've since gone back in my memories and refreshed about how this actually occurred. So I believe I read the first one, I think about the same time as you, Irvin, somewhere around when the second or the third was out. And
2008.
I remember, somewhere around there. I remember being in high school, and it was like in the throes of Harry Potter, Twilight, fantasy, everything. Let's get the most popular things. And I remember being like, oh, Greek gods, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so picking up Percy Jackson. But I think I believe I stopped reading because they just weren't coming out fast enough. And then my brother, Michael, he read through all of them, and I'm the one who introduced him to Harry Potter. And so I credit him for reintroducing me to Percy Jackson. And so
I love that.
He was like, okay, you said you liked the first one. You got to read them. So I read those, and then kind of fell away from the whole Riordan everything until I was working in Barnes and Noble, and the first Magnus Chase came out, and I went, oh, I really want to read that. And so I bought it and I stuck it on my shelf, and then I went, now I got to read everything all the way up until that. And so I did. And I will agree a little bit with Irvin that I don't think Heroes of Olympus is as good as the first 5. But I love Magnus Chase so much. And probably because it's Norse mythology, and that is my jam. And then, but I also really love the Trials of Apollo, although I have not read the final one of that because, I don't know, reasons. I got distracted by the many other books on my shelves. So I still have to catch up on those. And then I've reread a number of times kind of everything. And I actually I'm in the middle of a reread right now. So I have almost gotten to my favorite place in Titan's Curse as we speak. And so I'm like very excited, and I am looking forward to probably staying up way too late tonight to finish reading that. So
good, because I'm a little rusty. It's been a minute. And like, I don't know about you, but for me, Percy Jackson was part of the like quest for the next Harry Potter. Because, like, you know, Deathly Hallows came out in 2007, and we all read it, and we reread it, and then we were like, so, other books.
Right.
And, you know, sort of, you know, forgive me for the stereotypes, but a lot of the teenage girls just went right to Twilight, and a lot of the teenage boys did not. So I was like, well, it's not going to be Twilight.
I was like, it doesn't make it sadder because I was in college. I was like, I think I'm the oldest.
I was in college as well at the time, and I went Twilight. So, I mean, what can I say? But
so Twilight.
And so, like, you know, Hunger Games, like, wasn't on anybody's radar yet. It hadn't come out, or if it had, it, like, no one knew about it. And so everyone was like, you know, what's, like, a good, like, long-ish fantasy series we can sink our teeth into? And for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people, like, Percy Jackson was the one that hit. So, listeners, y'all are a savvy bunch if you are here at the pub with us. So, like, I'm sure you figured it out, but this episode, for episode number 28, we have gathered to discuss Percy Jackson. Our fandom crossover with Harry Potter and Percy Jackson. The first Percy Jackson episode we did last summer wasn't quite what we'd hoped it would be, when we planned it. So we are kind of hoping for a redemption round on the topic. This time we've gotten together a full panel of people who really like Percy Jackson. I think all of us are like really, truly big fans of the material. And so I think we're going to have a really fun time talking about our favorite demigod. Spoiler warning. We are discussing the 5 original Percy Jackson books. We're also going to discuss the TV show and the musical of Lightning Thief. So spoilers for the 5 Percy Jackson books, not Chalice of the Gods, not any of the other series. Spoilers for season 1 of the TV show, spoilers for the musical. You've been warned. And we always have recommended reading. So I'm a huge fan of the Lightning Thief musical, which we're going to get into. And I covered it very extensively back when it was in New York. I was one of the friendly press outlets to them when, like, the whole Broadway establishment turned up their nose. They're like, oh my god, it's a musical for young people. Gross, get it off Broadway. Not that we're salty. So I've collected all my articles about the musical in a page that we're going to link to. I interviewed the writer, Joe Tracy. I don't know how to say his last name, but he wrote the musical. He also worked on the TV show. I interviewed Rob Rokicki, who wrote all the music, and they're a really great bunch of folks. So, yeah, I hope y'all have brushed up on your Percy Jackson, and we're gonna dive in.
First, we want to just say a huge thanks to Shruka over on our Patreon, who bought us this round of drinks at the pub.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. If any of you other listeners would like to buy us a round at the pub, please head over to patreon.com/3broomsticks. That's with the numeral 3 to sign up. We are offering bonus content, chats with the hosts, on episode shout outs. There is a lot of stuff in development. So go check it out. See if it is interesting to you, because we are interested in you being interested. So
yes,
we really appreciate your help keeping the lights on here at the 3 Broomsticks so that we can continue to talk about Harry Potter for a long time to come and all of those hot crossover topics, of which we have one.
Yeah, which also, I will just say, listeners, like, let us know if you want us to cross over with other fandoms.
Yes.
Like, we've done Strike and we've done Percy Jackson because those were kind of the most obvious candidates for a Harry Potter crossover, but, like, let us know, like, what are your other favorite book series or even other media, and, we'll see what we can squeeze into our schedule.
Yes, we would love options.
We have discussed in meetings as well other possible things. So we have other ideas, but it's always nice to hear from the listeners what they want to hear us talk about as well.
Yeah.
Definitely.
We would also like to offer a toast to the comments on episode 25. This episode was for Half-Blood Prince Chapter 17, A Sluggish Memory. We raise our glass to Absent-Minded Raven, who said on the topic of Dumbledore telling Harry to show Snape respect, quote, I realized later, one of the reasons it rankles so much is that we don't see corresponding moments of Dumbledore berating Snape for his far more blatant lack of respect for Harry. Such a moment might have been useful in The Prince's Tale, but the included moments of Snape ranting about Harry have Dumbledore largely ignoring it. End quote. And, like, I loved this because I was like, yeah! And, like, it's not unusual. Like, it makes a lot of sense for Dumbledore's character and society at large and all of that for it only to go one way, right? It's a whole, like, respect your elders thing, which is actually very apropos to a Percy Jackson episode, respecting your godly elders or lack thereof. But it would have been so satisfying for Dumbledore to just tell Snape not to be a dick. Like, I would have loved to hear that.
That's so true. Yeah, I think that is a good moment. We talked a lot about, on that episode, we talked a lot about how, kind of Dumbledore's reasons for why he was discussing the topic of respecting Snape. And I think that would have gone a long way to just show one tiny little thing of like, hey, you talk about how much you hate this kid, but maybe don't treat him like dirt a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Hot take. Like, what if we tried that?
Kind of society kind of rides on him surviving. So like maybe don't make his life worse.
Yeah. Also, like, be less of a dick to children in general. Like,
just don't be mean to kids, I feel like is a
like
decent...
also something to consider. All right. And with that, let's get into Percy Jackson. And Mayuri, the reason we wanted to have you on is because I heard tell that you did a Percy Jackson presentation at a convention last year.
Ooh.
Yes. So at LeakyCon last year, in Chicago, me and a friend did a little bit of a comparison of chosen ones and prophecies and how that kind of drives the story, affects their development and that sort of thing. And I think the three that we talked about, Lori and I, were Percy Jackson, Harry Potter, and Buffy Summers, actually.
I love that. Also, guys, Buffy crossover when?
But yeah, so it was a really interesting discussion, and I kind of loved it at the time as like a new like convert to Percy Jackson, to be able to like kind of explore the dualities between Percy and Harry.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Amazing.
I mean, we're definitely going to get into the chosen ones, the prophecies, the all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like, if you have your notes or your presentation or anything, like, would love to see them.
Oh, yes. Yes, my co-panelist took copious notes. I thank her for it because I am not that.
Same! Oh my god, I do, like, joint presentations with Lori Kim at conventions, and she shows up with, like, her fully typed notes and with bullet points, explanations, and I'm there, I was like, I'm gonna wing it.
I know, she was just like, when can we talk about this in advance so we can talk about our points and like what we're going to talk about? And I was just like, I thought we would just like get on stage and be like, hey, we know a lot of stuff, let's do it. And she was like, she's a hard Ravenclaw and a librarian at that. So she was very much like, I need the bullet points and the talking points. And I was like, cool.
I need the plan.
I need the,
yeah.
I'm not a plan person. So.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, Lori and I, we go really in depth on like the performance aspect. We're like, okay, so what are the props we're bringing? What are the costume changes? What are the like games and giveaways? Like what are the props? What are the laugh lines? The content that we're going to talk about, that really sort of is the afterthought.
I had to warn her because that day, so that convention also was the first time I like went all in with cosplay, and I had cosplayed as a Lego Draco Malfoy. And
oh my god.
I was just like, I just have to warn you, like, I need like 5 minutes to take this entire situation off before our panel. And some people were like, oh, you're under the mask. And I was like, yes, I've been walking around with a helmet. You can see it. I actually got the helmet hair signed by Tom Felton. Hold on.
Oh my god.
Oh my gosh.
I must show you. So I made this, and Senior Tom signed it
Amazing.
for me.
What? That is amazing. Do you have photos of you in this outfit?
I do.
That we can put
I do.
Pics or it didn't
on
happen.
this
I have maybe. I don't know if you can see.
Oh yeah.
I brought
Yep.
I brought Mod Podge just to Mod Podge over his signature so that I wouldn't lose it.
That's brilliant.
That is fantastic.
Yeah. Percy Jackson, I guess we can sort of start bigger picture-wise, and then sort of start zeroing in, and we're going to talk about adaptations towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, Sierra, you had some good ideas on, like, sort of the big picture themes present in the two series.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the big ones is going, quote, quote, home every summer. This is something that I think is both very, very similar between the two stories, but also in some circumstances and the details can be almost completely opposite. Percy leaves before he goes to camp. Percy leaves school every summer to go home to smelly Gabe because Gabe is so terrible that he masked the scent of Percy, son of one of the big three, from monsters, which how stinky do you have to be? Like, Grover can still smell him on Percy even after time apart, which is wild.
Yeah, that is strong Dursley energy.
Yes, very much so. And so, on the Dursley side, Harry has to go home to the Dursleys every summer to renew the protection from Lily. A mask of smell versus a mask of protection. And so I think that's where, they're really, really similar, where you get the differences is, Harry hates going home, period. Who can blame him? Whereas Percy's a little bit more conflicted because he also gets to go home to his mom, and they have a wonderful relationship. So you kind of have that little issue there. But then, once Percy starts to go to Camp Half-Blood, then it changes even more.
I just wanted to talk about Sally. I feel like that's sort of one of the biggest differences. Both Harry and Percy have a lot of parental issues. But Harry Potter is so very much the story of an orphan. And Percy Jackson is so very much the story of a single mom.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's sort of one of the biggest overarching differences between the two, just because it's so integral to who they are and how the story unfolds.
Definitely.
And I also just shout out to Sally Jackson. She's one of the best parents in all of fantasy literature.
Yeah. For sure.
You don't generally have good living parents in this genre. Exactly. So holler to Sally.
Yeah, it's very rare that you get a parent that is actually a part of the story. And she's not super, super important. She is definitely, especially in the first book, but it's really nice to get that, especially because the other series that I think about, to me, in relation to these two series, is the one of my other favorite series, which is Series of Unfortunate Events. And that all of these series connect in ways where a lot of the adults let the children down a lot, and especially earlier on in the series. And it's so nice to have Sally be that rock there for Percy the whole time, and the thing that he's fighting for throughout at least the first book. So I agree. I think she's a great parental figure.
Yeah.
And it's so heartening to have a mother not trying to mollycoddle her child out of danger.
Yes.
Yes.
No Molly Weasley's over here.
Right. Well, my friend Anna Mariano often says that as a parent, your job is to make sure your child is not the protagonist in a YA story.
Great goal. Great goal.
Right? Really, that's parenting 101.
They're the protagonists you've done wrong.
Yes.
I'm getting that on a t-shirt now. I'm just letting 100%. You know. That's happening.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. And Sally is one of the very few exceptions where you don't have to sneak out past her or lie to her about what you're doing. She's just well, I don't love that the fate of the world rests on you every 6 months, but
it is what it is.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what happens when you fall in love with one of the big three.
Yeah. Well, and even in Titan's Curse, when Percy's debating, am I going home? I got the D'Angelos safely to camp. Am I going home now? And he calls his mom. His mom is well, I hate that I'm saying this, but do you need to go save Annabeth? Is that something you need to be doing right now? If you really think you need to be there, then I hate myself for saying this, but you need to go. Which is absolutely wild, but so refreshing to have a parent that understands and accepts that you know what? I had a child with a god, and he now he's been in danger his whole life. That has not stopped. And this is just how life is for him.
That's like
and,
his lot. Like he's responsible for this.
Mm-hmm. And she knows how much he cares.
Yeah.
Yeah, instead of trying to like baby him to the other side, like, no, it's not your responsibility and you shouldn't do this. Mm-hmm. She's very much like, actually, like, do what you need to do. I will support you, which is huge.
Right. Yeah.
And like, I love that Paul Blofeld gets into it, where he's like, all right, I'm gonna try to cut off the heads of these monsters I can't see, because I guess that's part of dating Sally and she's worth it.
Right.
Like,
which is so adorable.
Amazing.
Like, it was actually so nice to see that, because like, you think about what she gave up in her life, right? To be with Smelly Gabe simply for Percy's safety.
Right.
And so like, seeing that, you're just like, what a silly, lovey man.
Oh.
Right.
I know. And well, I mean, even just think about like the stereotypical step parent. Mm-hmm. How often are they actually portrayed well in any media ever, period? Mm-hmm. So like having a Paul Blofeld in media, it's amazing. Like, think of all those step parents who have always been like, well, my child is going to hate me because I'm not their biological parent and I married their whatever. I'm evil. And now they get a person they can be like, here, read Percy Jackson. I'll be like Paul.
Yeah.
Not Gabe, though.
I'll support
not
you.
Gabe.
I am here for you.
No,
not Gabe. But that was a marriage of necessity and convenience-ish. So, it's not because they actually all wanted to be together.
I love your connection of like the Petunia's blood magic and Gabe's smell as like the protection, because it's the same thing.
Yeah. And where it starts to really, really differ though is once Percy starts going to Camp Half-Blood, because then over the summer he's leaving the mortal world behind to go to myth and magic and danger, whereas Harry leaves the world of magic and danger to go to the Muggle world every summer. So then they almost become reversed, all Percy's winter escapades aside. Because it's not always exactly summer, but, that same kind of idea of basically flip-flopping. And I also think this is kind of a side note on just the like mortal Muggle world versus the magical. Percy, Harry hates the Muggle world, basically, because all he's really known is the Dursleys. But because Percy actually has good experiences in the mortal world, he's almost conflicted every time he has to leave one and go to the other. And I think that's also really nice, because it's not just like, I must escape everything to us, quote, quote, normal. It's very like, well, but my mom is there and I have friends, and, his friends end up being a part of the magical world, but that's beside the point. Grover, Tyson, Elizabeth there. So, but I think that it's nice also to have that little bit of a difference between Harry and Percy. Not that one is necessarily better than the other in terms of like a storytelling standpoint, but I do like that they're not exactly the same in that respect. Mm-hmm. Which comes back to Sally, because she's awesome.
Yes.
Just other things like with the mortal and Muggle world, I came across just a couple of things that made me really happy, of like things that are explained that are magic based, but like mortals think they're normal. Yes. And the one that I just cracked up on this last reread of Percy Jackson is that chain restaurants are monster nests.
Yeah. No, because isn't the chain a hydra? That. And like, every time you cut off a head, like another chain restaurant sprouts up.
Exactly.
Like, that was genius.
A monster donuts just appeared somewhere. And I love that so much. And the one that the like less exciting one that I found that I was thinking about in Harry Potter is like excessive mist being Dementors breeding, but it felt very similar of like,
yeah,
continuing the monsters are growing and like muggles or mortals notice these things, but they don't really understand what they're seeing. So, yeah, I really liked those little like bridges into the like muggle and mortal world of like, it kind of goes back to what you're saying in your intro of like, this could actually be real. We just don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's why I like these types of books.
Yeah, I mean, portal fantasies are great.
Yeah.
That's a good way to get into like the portal fantasy aspect of the series, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because Harry Potter, like, they're both technically portal fantasies, but Percy Jackson skews much closer to urban fantasy.
Yeah.
Like, because Percy Jackson, it's very much like road tripping on most of them, because that's a very American thing.
Sure.
And so, like, you know, even though we escape to Camp Half-Blood, we are then traveling through the Muggle world. And because of that, I feel like the sort of, you know, Muggles don't see anything is much more hand-wavy in Percy Jackson. Like,
oh, yeah.
In Harry Potter, because the wizards are much more hidden away, they're like, oh, well then, like, you know, if a Muggle sees something, then you obliviate him, and, like, it's a whole thing. There's a whole logistic thing. In Percy Jackson, they're just like, mist. They didn't see nothing because mist.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, fine, fair enough.
I do
like,
enjoy,
let's go.
so having read Percy Jackson for the first time as a fully grown adult, I was just like, the concept of the mist is amazing to me, because it's just like, how do you explain that all of these things are happening at the same time and we just don't notice them? And it's like, guys, it's the mist. And sometimes the mist is so strong that even we, the non-mortals, also get hoodwinked by it. Like, we don't know that Mrs. Dodds is a fury. We just, like, we were hoodwinked by the mist as well. It does kind of, like, right away a lot of the, like, I feel like this is not quite right situations. But that's why he wrote it that way, right? Like, it kind of is this all-encompassing, like, veil over the kind of Percy Jackson world.
Which, like, honestly, fair enough. Like, the reason I like fantasy better than sci-fi is I feel like fantasy is much more prone to being like, here's a concept, run with it with me. And I was like, yes, okay. Like, you don't need to explain to me how this technology or magic or whatever works. Like, you can tell me there's magic and I will be like, okay, what are we doing with it?
It explains everything.
Yeah. Right. And, like, there's a bit of it in Harry Potter. You know, not as much, but, like, there's also the, like, oh, well, we can't tell Muggles because they'd be wanting magic solutions to everything and we can't give those. And we're like, sure, okay, yeah, statute of secrecy.
Well,
Fine,
it's just like,
on.
you're just like, you can't tell the Muggles, remember that time that they burnt everyone at the stake? They can't be trusted. And you're like, you know, I do remember that. I do. It did happen.
That's a valid point.
I think as well, it's interesting to think about the fact that there's so much more history, and I think just a general understanding of, like, sort of the nebulous way that the Greek gods have worked throughout, just like all the different myths and legends we're familiar with. And there isn't oftentimes there's almost no explanation for why things are happening or how at all. It's just, you know, the gods do their own things. They have their control over their own sort of like powers or whatever it is. And it just, things happen. And so we, as people who enjoy the Percy Jackson books, when you're reading them for the first time, you're probably drawing from your prior experience with Greek gods, whether it's the Hercules cartoon or, for me, the God of War video games. Like, so you have these sort of understandings of how the world already works, and then taking the Percy Jackson story and setting it in a place that you sort of already can understand it from, your mind is willing to maybe accept things and just, like, let it go, because you're like, well, this is what I've known. Aphrodite is just Aphrodite, the goddess of love. And so you don't have to think about it too far beyond that, because you're already somewhat familiar with it, as opposed to, like, the concepts that JKR came up with, that she created or kind of molded into something new, so there's like a base understanding for the Greek stuff in there, if you're someone that had prior knowledge of that before you started reading the books. And I think that helps sort of separate those things and the sort of nebulous happenings, whether they're magical or destiny or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, and I feel like that's what makes Percy Jackson so much fun, right?
Yeah.
Is it's totally accessible either way. Like, if you don't know much about Greek mythology, you're like, I mean, cool, it's a fantasy story, like, let's go. Yeah. And if you do know, some amount about mythology, you're like, oh, what's the spin on it?
Yep.
And like, that's especially why I like the earlier Percy Jackson books, because I feel like Rick Riordan was much less sort of reverential. Is that a word? Reverent about like the myths. He was like, Ares is a biker, and just like, Hercules was a player, and he was just like, yes, everything you thought you knew, scratch it, reverse it, like, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
And Heroes of Olympus, which we're not going to talk about much, but I feel like it became much more the myth that you heard. Here is the character from the myth that you heard. And whereas in the original Percy Jackson books, it was much more loosey-goosey and much more fun that way.
I could see that. I always thought that was kind of like an archetype of being a Roman figure, because it is much more strict and kind of orderly, but... Yeah.
Which, like, no wonder I didn't like it, right? I was like, I want the, like, free-flowing chaos of the Greeks. Thank you very much.
Yes.
So those books did have moments, though, where you were just like, what is happening? The stuffed animals situation was hilarious. No, I was going to say one of the other things is just like, it also, you have to take into account like where people are reading it. So, I mean, I'm in the US, and when I read Percy Jackson, I was like, all of this makes sense. You go to summer camp. I know most of these places that they're going to, so I kind of understand the distance that they've traveled. And when you think about Harry Potter, like the added layer for people from the US is like, we don't have houses and prefects and head boys and like that sort of situation. So that adds a layer of like, even though it's real, it adds a layer of fantasy to me, because like I didn't grow up that way. Right. And so
I agree, that's true.
To me, it's more immersive because I'm like, oh, that's such a different situation, different world, like demerits and points and those sorts of things. And even just like going to boarding school, right? Like that's not a common thing in the US, but a lot of Percy Jackson is very like common type things. And I watch a lot of TikTok, and there's this one TikToker who's English who is constantly talking about, he's like, I never understood how far things away are in the US. And so like for us in the US, driving 45 minutes to like go to a store or go somewhere to eat is nothing. But in the UK, like that is quite the distance. They will not do it. Even just like, and so like during the first Percy Jackson Lightning Thief book, when you think about like on the page, it's like, we have to get from New Jersey to LA without flying. Like as an American, you're like, that is such an astronomical task.
Right.
Like,
let alone that there are monsters chasing you the entire time.
I had so much stress the entire time. I was like, how? And you have like 5 days. Like, what?
You're only in Nevada.
Like, you guys.
Yeah, they've only moved a state away.
I was reading it and I was like, enough with the side quests. Like, just get to LA.
Main quest line.
You need not just LA, but specifically Santa Monica, which you have to get completely to the coast.
It's like you have to go all the way.
Which is like another hour.
But I feel like for us reading it in the US, it is a completely different read than maybe someone from the UK who's not like understanding quite how far that is.
That's a good point.
That's fair.
And so like I feel like sometimes that history or like locationality adds a layer of fantasy that we don't even think about.
Yeah. I will say that the whole like camp and road trip experience was very far from mine growing up. But then in Last Olympian, when it's all in New York, and I was like, yes!
I know these
I was
places.
like, yes, let's run to 34th Street. Let's get with those lions. I was like, yes!
Oh,
that was great.
One of the things I just really want to touch on with Percy Jackson in particular is we've already kind of touched on it, but the portrayal of the gods in Olympus, because they are, as you mentioned, Urban, different from the traditional myth and everything. However, I'm a huge fan of how the gods are portrayed in the books. I've always been a big lover of mythology, and, sometimes the versions of the gods in different adaptations are either like too romanticized or they're too harsh or something like that. Although I do love a really good, super romancy Hades Persephone love story. Looking at you, Lore Olympus.
Ooh, have you read Everneath by Brody Ashton? I'm
writing it down as we speak.
Good.
Okay. Everneath. Got it. Yes, because I feel like it just goes like too extreme sometimes, but I feel like Percy Jackson was one of the first ones where I was like, yes, like you brought these characters into a very understandable modern day situation. Like you mentioned, Ares is a biker. Like this makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
He's not some like weird military sergeant or something that you never see. Like, no, like Ares is wild and he's like out there and he is just picking fights and he's starting stuff and he's just going for it. Like, that's the Ares that I want. And I feel like
Apollo as surfer dude is inspired.
It was so good.
Yes.
Every moment of that, I was like, Jesus.
Yep.
It's like, oh, you're gonna let like a small child drive the sun chariot, and it's actually like a red sports car, and you're gonna field questions the entire time you're like freezing and thawing things from a small child who's just very interested in how you're a big ball of gas.
But like at the same time, like the way he's characterized, you're like, yeah, I believe that he did all of that. Like he thought it was like normal.
100%.
100%, man. Like get going.
Tracks. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like the gods fight, but they also listen to logic and reason sometimes. Zeus. But they have their like true natures. They're good at what they're good at. They don't really like stray into each other's spheres. Artemis is always going to be a maiden. That is her jam. She is like a huntress and that is her thing. And like, that is her persona, but you can still make it interesting without having to like, oh, but she also helped No, she did this. Like, I really enjoy that it's really just one. And then in order to have a story like this, you have to have the pact between the big three is like, so it's like so crucial, but also like, it's a little contrived, but because literally anything Greek myth, it all goes wrong because Zeus couldn't keep it in his pants. Like that's like 90% of problems. So, but it does make sense that like World War II and the prophecy all coming together as like the final straw. Like I feel like that does make logical sense, for that to be the final straw, for these brothers to be like, you know what? Maybe let's hold off. And they all break it, but that's fine.
They don't all break it.
Right.
Hades does not. Hades does keep it in his
True.
Snaps for Hades.
That is true.
Yes. Snaps. Which is also why I love Hades. I didn't put him as one of my favorite characters because I feel like the gods are just like side.
Yeah.
But favorite god for sure.
I definitely agree. And there's a lot in Percy Jackson that's contrived to get us to the story. And like I said, I don't mind it. Like, the fact that like, monsters eat cell phones. So like you can't have a cell phone in the story. And I was like, fair enough. Yeah. Like cell phones ruin stories.
Yeah. See any horror movie ever.
Right. So like, yeah, the pact between the big three, I was like, I can go with it. And I like that it's based in World War II. It's actually like another big commonality between Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, that like sort of World War II, or like whatever the magical counterpart of World War II is, served as the last like sort of really big hubbub with like the last, you know, big bad dark wizard or whoever. So, you know, in Harry Potter, like Grindelwald, who was the last big bad, was defeated in 1945 in a parallel to World War II. And, you know, we'll never know exactly how, because those movies aren't happening. And
who cares?
Right. And I was like, yeah, no, I can believe that World War II was a big mess that was the gods' fault. I was like, checks out.
Yep.
And like, I kind of really hope that like we never learn any more about it. I was like, you know what? Just like vague general statement about it. I was like, yep, that makes sense. And we can move on.
Yeah, they're like skirting around it. Well, and the winners were on this side, and these gods were on the losing side, and these gods were on the winning side, and you can just kind of extrapolate from there. Okay, thanks.
yeah, okay.
But I like it because it's not trying to bash any god in particular, especially since you're going to meet most of them. So it's like, you don't want to have that kind of like, oh, well, I don't know about you.
Well, I also liked it because I feel like to explain exactly what happened would just be like so much exposition. It's just like so much talking and explaining. And you're talking to a group of kids that have ADHD, and it's so realistic. Like, guys, nobody cares.
Yeah.
Like, none of this is important. It happened. It's done.
Right.
Let's move on.
It also makes so much sense with the context of like the Trojan War and stuff. Like when there's like a really big war, like, all the gods take sides and it gets messy. So I was like, I can totally like guess that all the like really big wars, you know, the 7 Years' War, the World War I, World War II, I was like, yep, it was all the gods making a mess. Like that checks out.
Absolutely.
All right. Do we want to get into the characters? Sort of compare, contrast, see who all is who. I want to talk about the dynamics of the core trio. And in Harry Potter, the core trio is much more core and much more of a trio than in Percy Jackson, where like it's Annabeth, Percy, and Grover, but like also then Tyson and also then Rachel and then, you know, lots of people.
They've got silver and bronze trios as well.
Yeah. Yes. We have the pewter trio, the titanium trio, the, strontium trio.
The one where Annabeth is missing.
So many characters.
So, like, I guess the sort of most easy, straightforward commonality is Annabeth and Hermione. As, you know, the brainy smart girl in the trio. And, I mean, superficially, like, they both fill that role, but they're so different, and I love it, because Annabeth is so much more confident and so much more, like, she's so good in combat. Whereas, like, Hermione, she very slowly develops that confidence, because Hermione's new to this when we meet her, whereas Annabeth's been at this for, like, 5-6 years at that point. And up until Deathly Hallows, Hermione is useless under pressure. Like every time, like, you know, they're in a battle, she's freezing up or being dragged around by Harry.
Where's the wood?
Yes.
Yes.
She thinks like a muggle. That's the problem.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah. And like, and I love this for her, and I love seeing her come into her own. But it's such a different vibe to Annabeth, who's like, all right, here's what's up.
And also, my plan is the right plan. I don't care what you want to do.
Yes, because Athena always has a plan.
It is interesting. It's interesting to me to see like how their confidence is, especially since, like you said, Annabeth was at Camp Half-Blood for years, right? She's built up her reputation. She's built up her leadership skills, and like people look up to her. Whereas Hermione comes in not belonging at all. She is Muggle-born. On top of that, like if you really think about it, in such a like snooty society, she doesn't know her place in this society, right? Like she's constantly trying to prove that she belongs there to the detriment of that exact sentiment of like people don't appreciate it, and so they're constantly pushing her down, and to some extent she takes it. And whereas Annabeth is just like, I mean, she's a child, but she's got that like FU quality to her that I do love, and that's because she grew up, I feel, earlier, but also she grew up knowing who she was. Like, she's not just anybody's daughter, she is Athena's daughter, and she's the smartest in the Athena cabin, smartest, most capable. So, like, she didn't have to grow up into a leadership role, she just took it.
Right.
Whereas Hermione is constantly like, I do know what's better, but I totally understand if you want to try something different. And the part of Hermione that always gets to me is book 5. She knows that this is a trap. At the end of the book, she knows that the Hall of Prophecies is a dead trap. And she goes along with it because she cannot assert enough dominance over Harry to be like, you're an idiot. Like,
right.
like,
well, no, she tries.
I mean, she tries, but she hasn't.
And she does a lot because she gets him to check that, like, Sirius really is God. Like,
using, like, the most unreliable method.
I forget the fact that he had a mirror
possible.
that he could communicate with him with.
Yeah. But, like, the fact that she did that much, that Harry's like, oh my god, let's go rescue Sirius from the Ministry, and she's like, so should we check he's gone first?
I mean, she does try, and I guess that's also an inherent difference, right? Like, at that point, they're 15, and she has not made enough of an impact for people to trust her opinion outright.
Yeah, I feel like Hermione has, like, almost an internal version of the, like, ugly to pretty transformation. That's it. Like most teenage girls in like most movies and things. That's like, oh, well, you know, they let their hair down and they took their glasses off and like now they're a completely different person. Like I feel like it's that, but like internally for the most part, I mean, she does a little of the physical. She lets Madame Pomfrey carry on a little bit with the shrinking of her teeth, but who can fault her? Whatever. So, you know, I think it's more about like her abilities and her confidence. Like she has to have that full transformation from awkward kid who doesn't know when to just stop, like when to stop showing off and actually start like sharing the useful knowledge. Cause at first she's really just about like, I know all these things and I need to share it with everybody so that everybody else knows all these things. But I almost feel like if from younger, she figured out how to simplify and like, here's the vital information that we actually need to discuss right now. And here, like, people wouldn't tune her out as much. Cause I feel like that's the thing is like,
Annabeth's surrounded by people with ADHD. So like, she has to learn to get to the point.
Well, there's also that. Yeah. She's gotta like, already be there. But then also, I mean, she comes in, she's, as we've mentioned, she's already been there for years. She's been there longer than anybody else in the Athena cabin. She leads them, even just walking to dinner. She has that place as the head of the cabin, even though she's younger than a lot of the other people. Like, it's not about age. It's about, her confidence and her just ability to command the respect that she knows she deserves, which Hermione has to grow into. And I feel like Order of the Phoenix is a place where you really, really, really see Hermione's change with the DA, with pushing Harry into it, with the, you know, the cursed parchment, with all of that stuff, like really being like, well, and you could even argue it starts in Goblet with capturing Rita Skeeter. Yeah. But like she starts to have, but then that also carries through with, well, Rita, you're going to do this article. And I know that you're going to do it while I slowly sip my drink with my cherries in it, because otherwise I'm going to reveal all this stuff about you.
Have you arrested and placed in jail.
Yeah.
Listen, book 4 into book 5, Hermione is top tier. Like,
Yes.
she's learning
Yeah.
where to assert herself. But again, and you said it, like, she's gone through so many years of people tuning her out, tuning her opinion out,
Exactly.
taking advantage, that, like, you don't really see her as a leader until, I honestly think, until, like, the Horcrux hunt.
Right.
Because that was all her, right? Like, that was her planning, her knowledge, and her, like, looking out for them really trusting in Hermione more. And that's where it's, like, rough to see how long it took for them to get to that place. It's actually a really funny point in, I know we're going to talk about the TV show later, but one of my favorite lines is where they start their quest and Annabeth is just like, we're going to be doing this, this, and this. And Grover and Percy are walking and Percy goes to Grover like, does she know that she's not in charge? And I just laughed so hard because I was just like, that's such a Percy thing, first of all, to be like,
Yes.
I thought we were just going to vote. Like, who put Annabeth in charge? Annabeth put Annabeth in charge. And so that's where it's just like, it's they're still young, like they're still in that age group, but it's just nice to see like how people believing in her earlier on improved her confidence to the point where she could just carry on and not care what other people thought.
Yeah. And I feel like we touched upon this in the Lockhart episode, but like there's also the fact that Annabeth is much more attractive than Hermione is. And like Hermione comes into her own somewhat, but like Annabeth is sort of the like, classic like, all-American girl, like the blonde hair from California and all of that. And so, yeah, I feel like people are going to treat her differently and are not going to disregard her.
Yeah, she is pretty
purely
privileged.
based on that to an extent, which like, yeah, like it's not fair and it's not right, but we as a society lend credibility to people who are better looking. Which, like, Annabeth sort of has the opposite struggle where, like, she has the, like, blonde California girl, like, stereotype working against her, but she dispenses with that very quickly.
I think from my perspective, thinking about the two characters, it is kind of interesting because I have gone on record before many times as saying that I am not a big fan of Hermione. I think she's definitely one of the more, like, overrated characters in all of fiction, apart from Lupin and when we're talking in the Harry Potter series. But I think the interesting thing there is that while I like Hermione, and
everyone, please send your hate mail to Patrick at his.
we could do it all day. We could do this all day. But it's interesting because while Annabeth is a very similar character, I never felt myself being frustrated with her. I was almost more like I would definitely say that first glance, first impressions, because obviously Hermione is great and she is a really great, well fleshed out character. But one of my problems I've always had with Hermione is that all of her faults are admirable faults. Like everything that she has that is slightly off-putting or that is slightly like a negative to her character is sort of an admirable negative. And I feel like I feel like
She's
most of the
perfect job candidate.
She cares too much.
Yes, she cares too much. She's too smart. She wants to give too much information. She's delicate in certain ways, like when it comes to fighting and things, and she's not overly aggressive. And she, any of her negative qualities, I feel, are somewhat at least admirable, and if that makes sense. But with Annabeth, I feel like her negative qualities take her to darker places, and maybe it's just because she is more experienced, like we've been saying, and she has to make a lot of very tough decisions, as all of the characters in Percy Jackson do. And that includes betrayals and all sorts of, It's interesting for me to think about the two characters together, which I hadn't done until I sat down and started thinking about this and looking at the doc, because my initial impression was to dislike Hermione, but I liked Annabeth right away from the start. And it's interesting to kind of think of why. And I haven't fully fleshed out my thoughts there exactly, but like I said, I think right from the beginning you get a little bit more depth with Annabeth's character, and then things are slowly revealed through her character, things about her parents and just the decisions she's had to make and why she makes the decisions she makes later on, and the deceit that happens in all of the different books, and then the sort of like the red herrings and things like that, I feel like all sort of contribute to making her more of a gray character, whereas Hermione, I feel, is her heart's always in the right place, or for the most part, at least. And
I wouldn't say Hermione's heart is always in the right place. She has a very large, vindictive, ruthless streak.
That's true, but I also think that in a lot of those cases, like I hate it when people mention the Marietta Edgecombe thing, because it's like Hermione did not do that to Marietta Edgecombe. Hermione did that to whoever betrayed. It could have been any person. You know, it's not like it could have been anyone in the DA that betrayed. It wasn't specifically to Marietta.
Yes, but Hermione chose not to inform people that they were signing a cursed piece of paper.
That's true. I just feel like there's a lot of emphasis put on the specifically that it was Marietta Edgecombe or whatever that it ended up being. I don't know if people
more Rita Skeeter and Umbridge.
I suppose, but she didn't really know what was going to happen.
Harsh.
She didn't know what was going to happen with the Umbridge thing, though. That wasn't necessarily her fault. I don't think. She didn't know the centaurs were going to show up.
I'm sorry. She's a very smart individual. She knows history. She knows myths. She has to understand what centaurs are like, right? Because they're constantly warning Harry, like, stay out of the forest, bro. We're going to kill you one day. So leading a fully grown witch into the forest where she knows there's a giant who will do whatever they tell them to do, and the centaurs, I'll digress, but Hermione has always been, in my book, a closet Slytherin.
Well, I wouldn't disagree with that. But
no, see, I do disagree with that, because she does it all for noble reasons. She's like,
but they're noble to her. Yeah. Okay, so that's a whole separate thing.
Okay, we are digressing. I mean, we just had an episode all about Hermione's love life. We can have another episode all about Hermione's, like, vendettas. Should we touch on our two chosen ones with, black hair and green eyes?
Yes.
And lots of sass. Harry
lots
and
of hero
Percy.
saving complexes. They both got saving people things.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They do have that. They are both sassy as hell, which is why we like them. And yeah, they're both just sort of chosen ones entering this magical world with very little knowledge of it, where, like, sort of they're just trying to keep up with everyone. Yeah,
and they find themselves to be, like, suddenly good at whatever it is, without like really, with Harry and Quidditch is kind of like the most obvious one, where he just like suddenly takes to it and he just can do it really well. Whereas Percy, like, he takes one step into the water and all of a sudden he can fight like nobody's business. And it's one of those, like, they're just thrown into these situations and they have to figure it out. And it turns out like, oh, okay, I can survive, which is nice for the story.
Yeah. I definitely say Percy is a lot more overpowered than Harry. Mm-hmm. Like, Harry is like a good wizard who, like, has, some things he's good at, like Quidditch, sort of the way everyone has, like, a talent or two. Percy is just like, yeah, you get me a glass of water and I will mess you up.
But it makes sense. It makes sense, though, if you think about it, because Harry's, Percy's facing a chimera, whereas Harry's facing Dolohov. So it needs to be a slightly more of that overpowering. Percy's definitely facing the more difficult enemies that basically resurrect.
No, he's not. Dolohov is a badass. Dolohov can take out a chimera any
That was
day.
a bad example. You're right. Dolohov is badass, 100%. I should have said one of the other Death Eaters, one of the B ones. Definitely not one of the A tier.
I mean, at the same age, like, Harry took on a basilisk.
Yeah,
that's true. I always forget about that because it seems so
pretty much.
And actually died.
The basilisk pretty much killed him until like the Phoenix showed up.
Yeah.
No, I think, like, when it comes to that, I sometimes don't enjoy that kind of trope where it's just like, ooh, you found out you have powers and now you're automatically good at everything. It's like the Matrix loading into your brain, like, oh, now you can do it. But at the same time, like, maybe that's kind of just how the demigod powers work, right? Like, you're oblivious to it until you're not, and then it's just there.
Yeah.
Well, but he also he isn't good at everything though, because when he's first at camp, Luke is taking him around to all the different things that he can do, and he sucks at everything.
He's terrible.
He's terrible.
Yeah.
And then he starts like kind of sword fighting and realize like that's when he actually starts to show that he can do something, but he can't do archery for crap. Like,
I will say that is
archery.
one montage from the TV show that was hilarious.
Yes.
And they do blunder through a lot of the things too. It's not like they're fighting these grand battles. That comes later on in the series. They kind of just shuffle their way through things and get lucky a lot of the times because they're having help with that they don't even know that they're having.
Well, I think that luck plays a huge factor for both Harry and Percy. It's just like, oh, hey, you got killed by a basilisk? Oh, yeah. How lucky that you met this phoenix earlier this year.
And you happen to remember that if you called.
I know. But that's why it's just like a lot of like the explanation of why things work out really just boils down to luck in a lot of their situations.
And destiny.
And destiny and
I
prophecy.
find that because when you think about it from destiny and prophecy standpoint, it's like, well, Percy couldn't have died at this point because it wasn't his time yet. So certain circumstances will come about to keep him alive, whatever that is, whatever power that is.
Percy totally could have died.
I know. I'm
there
just
were
saying
plenty of other big three demigods.
Right. I'm just saying as a way of looking at it sort of like big picture wise. The more I think of it as like destiny is putting them in these exact places at this exact time, whatever that destiny happens to be, whether it's a prophecy or God's intervening or whatever. To me, I feel like I can allow things to be a lot more fluid that way rather than nitpicky.
I guess we're going to get into this later with prophecies and all that, but I feel like one of the key differences is with Harry, the question isn't what he's going to do as like so much as how's he gonna do it? Like, Harry's up against Voldemort. Like, he is outmanned, outclassed, outgunned. Like, you know, how on earth can this teenager take down the most terrible dark wizard of all time?
With love.
With love, yeah. So, like, with Harry, like, he doesn't need to be overpowered because the story is, like, he's at a power disadvantage. What's he gonna do? With Percy, the story is much more like, what is he going to do with all of this power now that he's this badass demigod? So for Percy's story, it works to have him be much more overpowered because it's a very different arc that's playing out.
Yeah.
All right. So, moving right along, the third member of the trio, Grover versus Ron. And I feel like here, I'm going to be the Patrick where I'm going to be like, well, Ron's terrible, but I love Grover.
I kind of agree. I am not a big Ron fan. I never have been.
Oh my god, we are never gonna have anyone on this podcast who likes Ron. Like, just there are no people left in this world who like Ron.
I think he's okay. I don't know.
He's not like my absolute favorite, but I like him. I don't think he's as useless as he comes across, and I think that he's maybe a little bit I like the way that he's written in such a way that he's like almost always right, and yet nobody ever thinks that he's right because they think he's joking or something like that, but he's like secretly, it's one of those ones where it's like, is he like actually a seer? Because he got all that right, but he said it as a joke and then got cut off, so nobody took him seriously.
Yeah.
So I think he's like he's almost a little like, not, what's the opposite of what you were saying about Hermione? Like, you think she's overrated. I think he's underrated.
Yeah. I think Ron is a great example of a really good real life best friend. You know?
Yes.
He's there, almost always there for you, but you have your falling outs maybe, but also just like, I feel like he's a great example of a best friend for Harry. And I think that that's probably my favorite aspect to his character, is that not necessarily that he's always there, but that he's not there sometimes. And those moments are impactful, and they have relevance to the story. But then they can overcome those differences when they happen throughout the series, and then they're stronger together afterwards. And in the end, he is always going to be there for him. And it's not just the moments of heaviness, it's the moments of levity. And that's one of the big reasons he's there, is to bring levity to the situations. But those kind of people are necessities in life. And so having Ron be there and be that is, I think, just as essential as Hermione's knowledge. So
yeah, I'd agree. I feel like Ron is almost like the most real person. Like everybody knows a Ron.
I agree.
Like, you might not know someone who's as intelligent as Hermione. You might not know somebody who can, do all the crazy things that any of the professors can do. You might not have, a wise mentor, but everybody knows just like a dude who's down for a little adventure, a fun sport, and eat a bunch of food on a feast day. Like,
he's
that's
like, me. He's just, I'm Ron. I'm the Ron. If you don't know anybody, it's the Ron. You're the Ron. And I don't mean that in a negative way.
I like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I enjoy Grover, but we also have to realize that, like, Grover is older than the kids by a lot. And like, he's grown up in a completely different structure and basically lore situation. Like, the satyrs are completely different than demigods.
Right.
Every time, honestly, in the first book, every time they were like, Pan, and I was like, why? Pan has nothing to do with us right now. Like, why do we care? But that's why it's just like, I had to read it and be like, actually, like, for Grover, Pan, and like the search for Pan and getting his searcher's license is like all he's ever wanted.
Yeah.
Right.
And like, it's great that he has his own quest going on. Like, it's not all about Percy. It's just mostly all about him.
Well, I mean, I think that's the main difference between this trio, the Percy Jackson trio and the Harry Potter trio, right? Like, the Harry Potter trio is focused on Harry. Without Harry, they would not be anywhere close to where they are, right? Like, they would not be going on quests. They would not even be speaking to each other, to be honest.
Right.
But Grover and Annabeth have their own existing relationship. They have their own existing prophecies, quests, that sort of thing, that is driving them forward. And Percy comes along and he just like fits in the puzzle versus becoming the main character.
Yeah. Yeah, because Annabeth and Grover have existing relationships with, 90% of the other campers before Percy shows up, and they have their own history, which has its own challenges and their connection there, and with Luke and Talia. And, it's like they already have that, and it's almost like Percy's like intruding upon their existing world. Whereas, in Harry Potter, like, it's Harry's world that they're brought into. And so it is pretty much like the opposite. And it is really based on those individual relationships, which is why I think the quest format but the quest format really like informs those individual relationships, because the quests all have their requirements. It's you and then the two people, unless specifically stated, like the quest for Artemis specifies that 5 shall go west.
Yes.
So you have those specific things that are laid out. And so you need to have those specific people. And if someone is off doing something else, Grover's on his quest for Pan, well, we can't take Grover. Well, Annabeth is missing. We can't take Annabeth. Et cetera, et cetera. Clarice is off on her own thing. Clarice. We can't take, she can't be part of it, or whatever it is. So, it's like, but it's like you're going, oh, well, we have Percy, Grover, and Annabeth. Well, then the next one we're going to have Percy, Grover, and Annabeth. And then Grover goes, I'm going on a quest for Pan. And you go, well, great. guess we're not going to have Grover. and then you're going, okay, all of us are back together again and we're all going to be there. And then Annabeth isn't there. Oh no. So it's like, it's almost like, well, let's get the trio back together. Never mind. You're going to go talk to all these other people instead. But I really like that aspect because I feel like it's more because of the location and the situations that each set of characters are in. It makes sense because in Harry Potter, they all go to the same school. They're all in the same dorm. They're all there all the time together. So it makes sense that they would just gravitate towards each other and be together, the three of them, all the time. Whereas in Percy Jackson, it just doesn't work out that way. And they spend most of the year apart. And so they're only coming together for a short amount of time. And it's usually on a quest where someone can't go. So I like that it's not forced to have the three of them together all the time.
Yeah. Like,
even though I love the three of them together.
Yeah. Like I never quite thought about it like before we were working on this, but like the dynamics are so different because I feel like in Harry Potter, like they're a trio, like their relationships are to each other, like as a trio, as the three of them. And in Percy Jackson, it's much more individual relationships among all of them. Like for all the reasons you said.
Right. Why, when something happens, is it always you three?
Yeah, I do. Why is it always you three? And it's just like, well.
Yeah.
And, like, we very briefly, like, lose one of them. Like, we lose Hermione in Chamber, we lose Ron in Prisoner. But, like, those moments are so few and far between. And, like, sort of, henceforward, it's always, like, the three of them.
Right.
While that develops the three of them so well, it is a little bit to the detriment of, like, the other characters. Like, I sort of feel like, like, Percy's relationships to Tyson and Nico and Luke and Talia are a lot more fleshed out than, say, Harry's are to, like, you know, Neville or Luna or Ginny.
Right. Yeah.
I think that is a good point because it's just like, because we're so focused on the three, they don't really develop, or we don't see a development of a relationship with anybody else. Like, Ron's little sister is in his house and you're just kind of like, she's an afterthought for most of the books. You're like, oh yeah, that girl, that dumb girl who wrote in a talking diary. Yeah, she's fine. Like, and I wonder, so sometimes, like, I think we've talked about in other podcasts, or I've something like that, how Harry is an unreliable narrator. And I think it's because he's just, like, so focused on his inner circle. Like, he doesn't think that other people, like, the DA is actually great because you learn about other students in the school. You're just like, oh, hey, like, remember Susan Bones? Like, her whole family was killed. Like, Harry doesn't...
Except for her aunt.
But, like, Harry doesn't own the tragedy of the Wizarding World, but you feel like he does.
Right.
Because that's all you know. And you only know, like, Ron and you don't even know that much about Hermione, to be honest. You only know Hermione in context of Harry.
Yeah.
Right.
There's this amazing moment in Goblet of Fire when Harry finds out about Neville's parents, and he's like, he had always received so much sympathy for being an orphan, but he kind of thought Neville, like, deserved more sympathy now. And it's like, a lot of people got a lot of shit they're dealing with.
Well, but that's why it's just like, and you realize, like, this kid didn't even realize till he was 14 that one of his good friends' parents, like, he never questioned why his friend was being raised by his grandmother. Or, like, the story that drives me wild is when Neville tells people that his great uncle Albert tossed him out of a window when he was young to see if he would, like, present magic. And I was just like, these characters are so interesting. Like,
Right. Why are we not talking about these people?
And in Percy, I feel like Percy has a much wider circle. And that is honestly, like, Percy's growth is so much rounder than Harry's. I feel like as the series goes on and like the things that he learns and the way that like the person that he becomes, and I feel like that's because his circle is so huge.
Yeah.
Do you think part of it is the first person perspective in the Percy books, though?
I think so. I mean, it's hard.
I don't really. I think it's more what Sierra was saying about just the format of the Percy Jackson books.
Okay. Just curious.
And, like, that's also why, like, the Lightning Thief twist is so effective.
Oh
like, you know, if someone told Harry Potter, like, you shall be betrayed by one who calls you friend, he just sort of looks between Ron and Hermione
I have two
being
friends.
like, well, I guess flip a coin and let's see.
It's one of you guys. I guess the twist could be it's Neville.
Right, and he'll
because,
be like,
you know, he stood up to his friends.
Not that kid.
checks notes, not Neville.
That always like slightly bothered me in you know, Dumbledore's whole speech. It takes a great deal more to stand up to your friends, and I'm like, but are they his friends?
I know, like the whole book, you're like, are you friends with that kid? Like
you kind of feel bad for him, and like you kind of help him every once in a while when he's, you know, he has to bunny hop all the way back to the dormitory, but like you're not really his friend.
They might be the closest thing, though.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
They're the closest thing he has to friends.
Yeah.
But they
that's
consider
what Dumbledore's
him
talking about
to
in the
be
moment, though.
their
He's
friend?
talking to Neville.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, like he's
Fair
standing up to the
enough.
closest thing he has to friends, which is more brave in a way. Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. Especially if he's like fully aware that he's like, yeah, you guys are my best friends, but I'm not yours. Like, that's a huge, yeah, okay, fine. Yeah. I can see.
Okay.
I can see. But it still has always bothered me. But I will concede that point, that it is still brave for Neville. I'm not saying I don't think he deserves those points. I think he does. I just think the phrasing
he only got 10
of
points,
that situation.
so...
Which is also lame. That's just like, I really wanted Gryffindor to win.
I mean, he didn't go on the quest, though. He didn't go on the quest, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
But
you get so many more points for going on an adventure.
Harry, Ron, and Hermione each get 60 points instead of Harry getting Harry gets 10 more for defeating Voldemort.
Yeah.
It's
Just
you
10.
know, we could talk about
10.
Dumbledore math for...
Yeah. The
That's
math
its whole
is,
other
I need
episode.
Gryffindor to
as
win.
a Slytherin, I get so salty over the Dumbledore math. Okay, like, what are you talking
And
about?
as a Hufflepuff, I get so salty about Dumbledore math.
Yes.
Because my folks were going to go
Hufflepuffs.
third or nothing that year, but...
Third or nothing.
Right.
But no. So, like, it is kind of the format, but I don't know. It's sometimes when I read the books, it's funny because when I was doing these panels, there was someone who commented on the panel that they were like, well, this is just the archetype that the author is using in the books. And I'm like, well, sometimes when you're analyzing the book, you can't just rely on the fact that it's a fiction, like it's a book that you're reading, like immersing yourself into it. Like the answer can't just be, well, it's in Harry's narrative versus the way that Percy Jackson is like written or something like that. Like you have to just live in it and just go off of whatever truth you know from the material. Because at the end of the day, it's just like, why do prophecies drive the plot forward? And it's like, well, because that's what we need to drive the plot forward. There's nothing else.
Right, because they do.
But yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I find it interesting to put, like, if you put Harry in Percy's shoes, would Harry be as successful as Percy was?
Like Harry's personality,
so we kind of play
in
this
Percy's abilities.
in Percy's like place with his power, but like with his general personality and like character development. Like, would the story kind of play out the same way? And like, where would that be different? Right? Obviously, the Sally Jackson of it all is a huge difference, but I don't know.
I think there would be a lot less sort of trying to tempt Harry to raise Olympus. I feel sort of within 5 minutes of talking to Harry, you're like, Oh no!
This
Like
kid's not
he's
gonna
too
do it.
Gryffindor goody two shoes. Like
He's not turning.
bust out like the Golden Fleece. Like let's visit the Lotus Hotel. Like Harry ain't gonna be it.
Harry's not going to go on the side quests. He's going to be like, guys, we got to go this way.
In Titan's Curse, Harry's just beelining for Annabeth. Like, he's like, yeah, saving the rest of the world, that's cool. But like, Annabeth really needs me. So I'm going to go there and hope everything else just kind of pans out. You guys got your quest. You're on it. Cool. You do that. And I'll be here. Because I think his saving people thing is a lot stronger.
Also, but one important commonality though is that like they both think that like nothing can happen without them. Like I love how many times in Percy Jackson, Percy's like, so what's my quest? And they're like,
nothing.
So it's not your quest. And he's like, but okay, so what's the quest that I'm going on?
It's like, guys, I know it's not my quest, but someone told me I should go. So I'm gonna go.
But I feel like a protagonist, I should be there.
Like, guys, I'm one of the big three's kids. Like, exactly. I must.
Well, we reached 5, and I realized I wasn't one of the named people, so problem. Excuse me.
Whereas
and then I overheard that you lost your 5th person, so here I go.
Yeah, so I got you. Like, I'm happy to help. And like,
you didn't want me, but you still got me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And like, Harry does the exact same thing, right? Where he's like, oh, well, I'm 11 years old and Voldemort's about to achieve immortality, so like, let's go stop him, guys.
not doing anything. Let's go.
It's my job to stop him, guys.
Especially Order of the Phoenix, where it's like, oh my god, like, my godfather is trapped in the Ministry of Magic. Let's go save him, fellow teenagers.
I feel like on most days, though, don't you think Harry would just be like, let's not do a quest today, guys? Like, let's just have a normal day? Because I feel like that's what he really wants overall.
Right, until he hears that, like, there's a cat stuck in a tree somewhere, and he's like, guys, let's go, it's quest time.
Harry's just got main character-itis. Like, it has to be him.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean?
Yeah, but as for how Percy would fare in Harry's shoes...
That's an interesting thought.
That is an interesting one. I don't know.
I mean, his impertinence would...
That would not serve him as well, which is interesting because you wouldn't think him and
Snape would not get along.
Yeah, no, not at all.
That would be so amazing, though, if there was like a Percy Jackson.
Percy Umbridge.
I did read a good Harry Potter Percy Jackson fanfic crossover. When I say good, it was mildly okay, but it was enjoyable to read interactions of like the Percy Jackson characters with Harry Potter characters, like the teachers.
Yeah.
Like with Minerva. Like Percy and Minerva is just... Oh, God.
But Percy and Draco
hilarious.
Would be so much fun. Because, like, so I've been working a lot on Draco and stuff, and, like, Harry cannot be bothered, like, 95% of the time. Draco's like, neener, 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 and Harry just, like, ignores him. And then there's, like, 3 times in the series where Harry, like, claps back, and Draco's like, how dare you? and Harry's like, yeah, then keep your fat mouth shut, and, like, walks on. Whereas I feel like Percy...
My man, he is not good at being challenged.
Percy, though, he would clap back at Draco, and Draco would not know what hit him.
Just to be petty. Yeah. Just to be petty.
Oh, it would be so much fun.
I now need Percy in Umbridge's classroom.
Oh my god, it'd be hilarious.
Because, like, Harry has his one big blow up, right?
Yeah.
But Percy would not stop at one, no matter how much he was tortured afterwards. He would clap back in every single lesson.
We see a little of it with Tantalus, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But, like, can you imagine Percy in McGonagall's office for his what do you want to do with your life with Umbridge in the back? I will help you become an Auror if it's the last thing I do. Percy, like, turns around and is like, yeah, you hear that?
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Why are you even here?
I'm picturing Percy, and very specifically Chris McCarroll from the musical, the reaction to the line, "Have a biscuit, Percy."
Have a biscuit, Percy. Love it.
But okay, can we talk about the baddies? Let's talk about the baddies.
I love a baddie. I think that the baddies in general can be broken down into 3 categories: villains, lackeys, and the big bad. So that's kind of where I have formatted in my head the comparisons and discussion here. So big bad, obviously, Kronos and Voldemort. Similarities: hyper persuasive, insidious in their coerciveness, really get in there. They're using others to help them return. You've got Luke versus Wormtail in the literal sense in this way, with using their bodies. Working in the background, but they have this direct mental link to the hero with the soul connection versus the dreams, which kind of goes back to that like insidious nature. Like the big bad is in the hero's head, literally. Like they're in there. They are in those thoughts. The heroes are like, have to piece this out. Like, okay, no, you are the bad. I cannot listen to you. And like, that's like a constant thing. It's not just like a physical presence that they're consistently fighting against. It's their own like mental capacity to deal with Kronos or Voldemort and like what they are trying to do. And I think that's what makes them, I think, more successful than other villains, is just how in your head they are.
Yeah, I guess I never thought of Kronos as like an epically successful villain. Like, I guess to me, when I think of Percy Jackson and like I think of an antagonist, it's gonna come back to Luke. Like I know Kronos is the big bad, but I was like,
right,
yeah, whatever. And part of that is we don't really get like an entire book developing him and his tragic past like we do with Tom Riddle. Right. Part of it is that I feel like Kronos had a much easier job. Like, you mentioned how hyper persuasive they are and everything, right? But Kronos was persuading people in a very fucked up system. Like, sort of, you have all these kids who are resentful, rightfully so, against these gods who keep messing up, and Kronos is like, hey, so you know that really messed up system that isn't working? Why don't you come with me instead? And it's like, yeah, okay, like, it's not a hard sell. Yeah. Voldemort, like, he is trading on people's prejudices to get them to become his minions in his quest for immortality. So, like, it's a much bigger leap, because, like, let's be honest, like, why on earth would, like, you know, Crabbe Senior care if Voldemort is immortal or not? And I honestly don't think Voldemort cares that much whether Muggleborns go to Hogwarts or not. So the fact that Voldemort could, like, co-opt all of society's prejudices to serve his very selfish goals is much more impressive, in my mind.
Yeah. I've always thought that Voldemort was a strategist. He basically was like, okay, great. How do I get the following I need with the least amount of effort? And it's just like, in the wizarding world, it's easy, right? Like, you exploit people's prejudices so that they blindly follow you. Like, the irony of all these purebloods hating on Muggleborns and Half-Bloods while simultaneously bowing and scraping at the foot of Half-Blood is amazing to me.
Yeah.
That irony throughout the whole series has always been hilarious to me. It never stops being funny. Because it's just like, you guys latched on to power to achieve your means, and then basically got upset when that power just ignored you to get what they want. Like, you're gonna die, you're gonna get arrested, like, I don't really care. Like, as long as you can, like, kill people in my name, I'm fine.
So actually, that's a good transition to talk about their lackeys or minions or what have you, right? So on the one hand, you have all of the Death Eaters, And on the other hand, you have, like, you know, the Half-Bloods who turn traitor. And I guess the Half-Bloods who turn traitor are a better analog for, like, the Slytherins of Harry's generation. And the Death Eaters are sort of like the monsters that Kronos is, you know, sending after you. And again, I will say Dolohov is worth more than a chimera.
Well, then you've got
disagree.
Fenrir Greyback, which he's both, so he's a
There you go.
monster and
Also
a Death
true.
Eater.
Yikes.
I think he would have been arguably a better big bad, or at least villain. Better than a lackey for sure, because he is horrifying. I've said it before. I will say it again. He is horrifying.
I wish we'd seen more of him in the series.
Yeah. He needed to be in it more, especially in the movies. He's not given nearly enough credit. If you just watch the movies, you don't even know that he was the one who turned Lupin.
Yeah.
But also, if you
That's
watch
like
the
a
movies, you
huge-
don't know anything about Lupin.
Right, exactly.
Like, you
This
don't know
is
that he was
also
a
true.
marauder. You don't know the anime guy. Like, none of
Yeah,
it.
this is also true. So, like, it's all wild. But anyway, like, yeah, I think with the lackeys, it's easy to see how they become lackeys, though, in both cases, because with the campers, as you've said, you know, they're young, they're easy to be convinced that the way that things are is bad, because it is, and it can be improved with a drastic change in leadership, you know, making promises that you may or may not keep, but, you know, the campers are just like, yeah, but things aren't working, so, like, let's try something new. And with, you know, it sounds a lot more enticing when there's no way to, like, change the system as it is that you can see.
And I feel like that's where one of the really big differences between the two series is there's no Dumbledore analog.
Right.
Like, you know, the system is working for a lot of people, not everyone, because Dumbledore is in charge at Hogwarts and blah, 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 best headmaster we've ever seen, all of that. But, like, Dumbledore is a good guy who takes care of people, who, you know, tries his best. And so if you're just like, oh, well, if only, like, the world would listen to Dumbledore, we'd be fine. So you have that in Harry Potter, whereas there's no, like, sort of, you know, overarching, like, good, wise, sensible leader who cares about everyone and you want to listen to in Percy Jackson. Like, you have Chiron as a bit of a mentor.
Yeah, I think that's, like, the closest
Right,
you
but it's not very close, honestly.
Yeah.
Because the Chiron isn't in a position of power in the wider demigod society.
Right. Yeah, in fact, he's even at, like, a detriment because he's the son of Kronos. People are less likely to listen to him and believe in what he's
So he's almost more like Lupin in that way.
Yeah,
actually. He's very Lupin-esque.
Except he's a good character.
Let's not
That was a joke. That was just a
disparage.
joke. That just
The Lupin hate shall end now.
I was like, the third book is my favorite book for a reason, sir.
It's my least favorite for the opposite reasons you love it. Who cares about the Marauders?
Fight,
Has no relevancy to the story whatsoever.
We're about to have a pub brawl up in the Three Broomsticks.
No, we're all good.
But yeah, I think when you compare the traitor campers to, like, the Slytherins, on the flip side of where the traitor campers have a system that is broken, the Slytherins are living in a world that they enjoy, right? Like, they get all the benefits. They're at the top of society, outside of Hogwarts, I mean, but, like, generally they reap the benefits of this traditional society, and to them, change is abhorrent. Like, they don't want change. And so they're there protecting their way of life as they know it. And to them, it's like an extremely radical view that's coming in, who grew up different, who have different, like, frames of reference, who basically believe a completely different system. And to them, it's just kind of like, we don't understand. We don't like this. This is bad. So it's like, it's a very easy thing to be like, well, and also, you can't label a group of people evil and then expect them to be on your side.
I also think that kind of on the point of Voldemort's coercing all of these people with their own prejudices to achieve his own personal goal. I think he's also facilitating everyone else's, all of his lackeys, their personal goals. He's just, because going back to Fenrir, he just wants bloodshed, and he just wants kind of very Heath Ledger Joker. He wants to watch the world burn. Chaos. And he just wants that chaos and that bloodlust. And Voldemort basically just goes, okay, do that direction. And is giving him, Fenrir doesn't care what Voldemort wants. He doesn't care necessarily about the prejudices. He just likes the chaos. So I feel like it isn't necessarily like that specific prejudice that Voldemort is drawing on. It's basically like, what is your thing that's going to get you on my side? Oh, you want to do that? Mm-hmm. Great. Do that here. And then I'll give you whatever you want to make that happen. And that's how he coerces people behind the scenes as well. That's how he gets the Ministry to kind of do what he wants, because the Ministry is out for its own goals, and, Umbridge is out for her own thing. And it's one of those, she's not a Death Eater, but she's definitely doing Death Eater shit. That's exactly what they want. And he's basically just creating a world in which people can do those terrible things that they've always wanted to do. It's like letting the intrusive thoughts win. He's just creating a place that all these people can do those bad things that they've always wanted to do, but couldn't because they're in high standing in society, or they'd be ostracized, or they'd be sent to Azkaban or whatever. And so I think that that's also the difference is with Kronos and the campers and everyone, they have a common goal that they are working towards. Whereas Voldemort is basically just like, recruit. What do you want to have? Cool. I'm going for my thing. So as long as you don't stand in my way or make things more difficult for me, go ahead. So I think it's a little bit more open because when you think about it, what is their goal? What is the Death Eater's goal? It is kind of hard to pinpoint exactly.
Well, as an organization, their goal seems to be pure blood supremacy. Right. But individually, it's sort of indulging their vices. Dumbledore has this amazing descriptor of the Death Eaters that I always come back to. A mixture of the weak seeking protection, the ambitious seeking some shared glory, and the thuggish gravitating toward a leader who could show them more refined forms of cruelty.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
There it is.
Mm-hmm. Can't say it any better than that.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm. Usually the case with Dumbledore. He has a way with words.
I think it is interesting as well that with Voldemort, there's a lot of fear in what he's doing. Mm-hmm. Whereas I don't know if that's necessarily true for Kronos. He uses manipulation more than fear, though there's obviously a lot of manipulation with the fear with Voldemort. But a lot of the people who follow Voldemort probably do so out of fear maybe more than anything else. Whereas I don't think you could say that for Kronos.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree for sure.
Yeah.
I think Kronos has his ideology that he knows will get to the heart of the people that he wants on his side. And so he's really more working on that. And then basically getting those few who really believe in that ideology to then go out and spread. It's almost like a pyramid scheme. He's like, I have recruited you
it's
two.
An MLM for each.
Exactly. I've recruited you two to then recruit 5 more people each who will then recruit. And it's kind of like that. And so then that's how everything really spreads. And which is almost the same thing that the campers still at Camp Half-Blood are doing, because they're going out and really they're having all the satyrs go out and start hunting for all the remaining Half-Bloods to bring them to their side as well.
To
it's
recruit.
Almost like all of a sudden we have to collect everybody and really get our numbers up. So I just think that that's interesting.
Yeah.
But speaking of those people, that we recruit right off the bat. We've got our.
Can we talk about my boy? Can we talk about my boy?
Yes, we can talk about the boy.
Oh, guys, Luke is just so great, and like he's so right.
Yes.
And like, okay, so you know how people say that like Snape is the most important character in the Potter books? And by people, I mean Laurie Kim. I feel like that's Luke. Like, literally, he's the subject of the great prophecy in parts of it. Also, if Percy Jackson is something that can be ring theoried, the way Harry Potter can, Luke is the subject of both the first and the last prophecy in the series. But yeah, I definitely think Luke has a lot of elements of Snape in him, where sort of like, you know, he goes over to the dark side and like has regrets and, you know, then defects very dramatically, sacrifices himself for the cause. And I feel like all of the like warm and fuzzy feelings that like people have towards Snape because he sacrificed himself and he was a hero and he was the bravest man, blah, 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 blah. Like, that's actually Luke. Like, he's the hero. He sacrificed himself. He's the bravest man we ever knew. Justice for Luke Castellan.
Don't hold back.
Let me tell you how I really feel.
Percy's child will be named Grover Luke.
Luke. Oh my god. Yes.
The two bravest men I ever met.
Grover Luke Jackson.
I mean, Luke, I feel like, is such a relatable, dynamic character from the beginning. In ways that, honestly, Snape and even Draco, like, could never, personally. I'm a huge Snape apologist, but I don't understand people's, like, warm fuzzies towards Snape. Like, it just, to me, doesn't quite track. But, like, I think with Luke being the same age, or, like, of the other campers, like, you kind of see, like, his struggle, right? Like, you learn in the beginning, you're just like, why would he do something like this? How crazy. And as you learn more and more and more about Luke and his struggles and his mom and, like, everything, you kind of sympathize way more. Like, you're just like, I get it. And this is so effed up. And, like, honestly, reading it, and I was kind of just like, yeah, man, Kronos got a good idea. Like, what is happening to me? Like, I'm like, yes, I am recruited.
Sign me up. Like, wherever you're, like, cruising around the tip of whatever, I'm like, yeah, I'm getting on that cruise ship with Luke.
Yes, Princess Andromeda +1, please.
Yes. But you just think about, like, how effed up these kids' lives are to a point. And, like, that abandonment issue that never leaves because they are never allowed to, like, interact with their parent if their parent claims them at all, first of all. So it's just like, but when you compare that to someone like a Snape and you're like, Snape did not, I mean, he had struggles, yes. But at the same time, like, I feel like he was not, like, the reasoning for him joining the Death Eaters was not to better, like, society.
No.
Right? Like, Snape was very in for it for number one.
Yeah.
He was like, I want power and influence.
I don't know that he wanted power and influence. I think he joined the Death Eaters as, like, out of intellectual curiosity. Like, basically, if you're Snape and you have invented Sectum Sempra and fixed all the potions in the textbook, and you, like, want to learn more about magic and want to explore dark magic and, like, all of those aspects, like, yeah, why wouldn't you join Voldemort? Like, he's not gonna join Dumbledore and try to learn from him.
To me, that makes it almost more like Snape had the... See, to me, when you phrase it like that, which I definitely agree with, he never signed up for being a double agent or having to be that manipulative or having to.
No.
So to me, it almost seems like it's more of a sacrifice on his end to do the job that he was actually required to do then for a majority of his life then, or maybe not a majority of his life, but however long, since he became the double agent or whatever. Like to me, that seems like a far more difficult thing than following someone who's telling you what you believe to be true, so it's kind of interesting to think about Luke and Snape in that regard. But yeah,
I always felt like Snape joined out of like peer pressure, basically. It's like all of his Slytherin buddies, the only people who like would talk to him after Lily stopped talking to him, and just all the only people that he really interacted with all went to go join Voldemort. So of course he would come too. Like I almost just felt like he got like, it wasn't really like a decision on his part. Like he just got swept along in the recruitment of, well, you're in this group of people and all of them are going to go join Voldemort over here. So you might as well come because we're the only people who talk to you. And that was always like the feeling that I got, is he just kind of like went along with it, not fully understanding what he was joining. And because I the only thing that was really keeping him from fully investing in these other people was Lily. And so it's almost like, well, I don't have her. I don't really have any other options anymore. Yeah. Is kind of more what I felt from him.
Yeah.
Well, so that's where I always assumed that, like, if you think about pureblood society, his friends are all purebloods that we know, right? Lily is gone. So whatever good influence that he had is gone. And he has to survive in a society where he is lesser. And he wants an education. So, like, if you think about mastery, how did he become a potions master? Who sponsored him? Because he has no money. So, like, you think about these sorts of things. And so, like, to gain maybe not power and influence, but just, like, enough autonomy over his life to be someone in society and to, support himself. And it's just like he followed the people he had to. Because one thing, and again, I am a big Snape fan, but one thing people also have to remember, like, sometimes the timeline, and you have to remind me, but how old was Lily when Harry was born?
20.
20. So you would assume that Snape joined the Death Eaters maybe when he graduated, 17, 18.
Yeah.
He was in the Death Eaters for over 2 years before he decided that, like, hey, this bad thing I did is about this chick that I'm still in love with. That's bad. So, like, whatever happened in those 2.5 years was not bad enough for him to be like, I need a way out.
That's true.
Right? So it's just like, did he not know what he was getting into? Or did he have an idea? Because people like Lucius Malfoy, you went to school with him, you hear the stories, you understand what's happening in the world. And maybe you join because, that's where the tide is turning and that's where your best foot steps forward. Like, for you to come out ahead, that's the way you have to go. Because if you think about it, even if he didn't, like, he had no options on the other camp. Like, they all hated him.
Right.
They never would have thought the best of him. So he went with what worked out the best for him in the long run until it didn't. Whereas I feel like Luke inherently was like, I did a bad thing for society and not one person.
But at the same time, the further into the darkness you go, the harder it is to pull yourself out. And while Luke's intentions were always good, like you said, for society, Snape was selfish at a time. And I feel like it was harder for him to pull himself out of that maybe and then to do what was required of him.
Well, also, Snape didn't really have anyone pulling him back, right? I feel
That's
like
true.
a very big part of what brings Luke back is Annabeth. Like, we've been saying that, once Lily was out of the picture, Snape had no one and nothing tying him, like, away from the Death Eaters, whereas Luke leaves Annabeth, which actually makes his departure sort of much more of a conscious choice than Snape's, but also helps him find his way back.
Right.
Yep.
Also, correct me if this is from only the musical, because I haven't read Lightning Thief in a while, but when Luke is betraying Percy at the end of Lightning Thief, does he mention Talia and, like, sort of, you know, avenging what happened to her and
a little bit?
Like
he mentions that it's unfair, and that, you know, what happened to her shouldn't happen. If I'm remembering correctly, he does bring that up there.
So I think that could sort of almost be like the Lily for Snape is Talia for Luke. Like, it's someone he cared very deeply about in a much more appropriate and much less creepy way than Snape with Lily. Just saying.
Yep.
And once Talia is, you know, I mean, dead-ish, he is so motivated to avenge what happened to her that he will do whatever. Except in this case, it goes the opposite way. Snape is motivated by Lily's death to defect to Dumbledore. Luke is motivated by Talia's death to defect to Kronos.
Yeah.
But it makes sense because of who, quote, quote, kills that person. Because
right.
Voldemort directly... Yeah, exactly. Like, it's the god's fault.
Yeah.
Like, Zeus didn't help Talia enough and also created her in the first place when he shouldn't have. And, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So it really comes back to basically just defecting to the opposite side of the one responsible.
Yeah.
I think this is one of my favorite things about the Percy Jackson books, and one of the things that I think makes them so interesting is where I think it actually has a leg up on Harry Potter is it's not clear-cut good and evil, right? So we can say that Snape defected from the evil side to the good side, you know, from good side to bad side. With Percy Jackson, it's not good sides and bad sides. It's like, you know, sides with good people on them led by very flawed gods, or sides with, you know, misguided people led by evil titans. Like, Harry Potter has nuance in most things. Obviously, we have a whole podcast. But I like Voldemort and bigotry and pureblood supremacy and, like, you know, everything Voldemort is and stands for is objectively wrong. And Harry and company are objectively right. They're like, the Dark Lord is bad, we are good, like, it is a battle of good versus evil. In Percy Jackson, Luke is right. Like, the gods are assholes. Like, the Titans are bad, the gods are bad, like, yeah, why not burn down the system? And that's what's so great about Percy Jackson is, like, as these demigods are coming of age, and, you know, are trying to figure out where their loyalties lie, and you have Luke, and it's like, well, like, we don't love his methods, like, you know, his methods are a problem, but he has a point. And so then Percy Jackson becomes much more of the, like, you know, what methods justify what means, and what ends, and I think that's a much more interesting question to explore than just, you know, how do we defeat a Dark Lord?
Sure.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right. So, since we've been talking about characters and all of these gods, it is time for the 7 ingredients of today's special. Woo, 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 woo.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
So, we actually have, since, you know, we're discussing 2 different series, we have a 2-for-1 7 ingredient special, because there are exactly 14 Olympians. So we can have 2 sets of 7. And the 14 Olympians in the Pantheon are Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, Ares, Apollo, Hermes, Hephaestus, Hera, Hestia, Demeter, Athena, Artemis, Aphrodite, insert Aphrodite, and Dionysus.
The goddess of love.
Yeah. Yes. And I think I have to ask here, Guys, what are your godly parents?
Oh,
that's a good one.
I was not prepared for this.
I'll tell you, my favorite god by far is Aphrodite. I think she is like so interesting in every portrayal of her. But I have no clue who my godly parent would be. The loser god, whichever, the worst one. That would be mine.
Oh.
Not a reflection of my real parents because they're great, but just me as a person, the god of apathy would be mine.
Dionysus.
Yeah, there
Yeah, yeah.
No,
The god
it can't be.
wine.
He can't be because I'm just so against drugs and alcohol. There's no way Dionysus could be my.
He's
my
drying out for a century. It's fine.
He's drying out for a
You
century,
know.
but it ain't long enough. It ain't long enough.
Patrick, I
trying.
feel like with your tech wizardry, you got to be a son of Hephaestus.
Yeah, that would have been my guess.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I also really tend to overthink things a lot. So, and I am a Ravenclaw, so I suppose Athena maybe, but I'm not clever in that way. I don't get one-ups. I don't have very much one-upsmanship in me. So I don't know if that would work really either.
Yeah. So I would love to be Artemis's, but I guess she wouldn't have me. So I'm gonna guess that my godly parent is Apollo. Like, you know, sort of, yeah,
That
the
tracks.
Renaissance man, like the creativity, like, you know, being the god of like 25 different things, because it's how I run my life. It's like, yeah, I feel like Apollo would be the one.
He gets up really early every morning, though, to like spin the sun around, though, Irvin. I don't know
Or
if you
maybe
could do
he
that.
just stays up really late.
Oh, that's true.
I know,
Maybe
I was
that's
gonna
his
say, maybe
last
he
thing.
doesn't go back. I don't know. This is a hard one because, like, I feel like we identify with a little bit with everybody. I've always been a fan of Hera in such a strange way. But yeah, I would say Hera or Hades.
Oh.
I would love to be a child of Hades, but I feel like I'm probably a child of Hermes. I feel like Hermes is just the most Hufflepuffy of
Yep.
them. Like, we collect everybody that nobody's claimed, like god of travelers, but also thieves. And it's like, you know, it's like mostly pretty good, but also there's a little slyness going on over here. So I feel like that's mostly me. I'm mostly like, okay, things are great, but then I can get a little sassy. So I feel like Hermes is probably my godly parent.
Love that.
But Hades is just so awesome.
And of course, we gotta shout out what is on the pub's jukebox today. So this is going to be another song from the Lightning Thief musical, which is amazing, and we're going to talk about it. Hold that thought. But in the Lightning Thief musical, Annabeth has this amazing anthem, like there's no other word for it, called My Grand Plan, where she's training Percy and she, like, you know, sings about, it's essentially her I Want song. My grand plan is that I will be remembered. And just like, it's so good. It's so empowering. I feel like every time I saw the musical, when Kristen Stokes sings My Grand Plan, like every girl in the audience sat up a little bit straighter. Like, it's wonderful. So here, give it a listen.
I've always been a tough girl. Always been the one not to run from a fight. Always been a tough girl. 'Cause most girls never win if they're polite. So me, I tend to stand my ground. I found I never can give in. It may not be my quest, but maybe it's mine to win. My grand plan is that I will be remembered. My grand plan, just you wait and see. But I promise you, I'll never be invisible again. Someone will notice me. I've always been a smart girl.
And so, listeners, we've been talking about Percy Jackson for well over 2 hours now, and it has been so much fun. And so I think we're just going to have to make another episode here and now because, well, you know, it's getting late at the pub. So call this part 1 of our Percy Jackson crossover, where we discussed all the characters, their analogs, the themes across the 2 books. And please join us soon for part 2 of the Percy Jackson crossover, where we're going to discuss prophecies, and we're also going to discuss adaptations, the TV show, the musical, and lots more.
So, Irvin, are you saying what I think you're saying? Are you saying we are officially initiating Death Eater Protocol for this episode?
Yes, for the very first time at the Three Broomsticks, we are initiating Death Eater Protocol, where we split one episode into 2.
Death Eater Protocol.
Yes. Patrick, please insert awesome sound effects here.
Yes.
Thank you so much again, Patrick and Mary, for joining us here at the Three Broomsticks. It has been amazing, clearly discussing with you guys because we keep just talking. So is there anywhere to follow you that you would like people to know about? Anything you want to plug? Share with the group.
Mary, you can go first.
Yeah, sure. So I have a kind of crafty / just random page. It's called Building Crafty Notions on Instagram. And eventually I will prop up my own podcast once my ADHD allows me to. I could be a demigod here. So
I am right there with you there.
I will also be at LeakyCon in Portland, Oregon this year, July 4th weekend. I have a few panels, but one that I'm very excited about is Legalities of the Wizarding World, where we'll actually take a look at what is law, what is inferred, and what is just random magical fact. And can you build a society on that?
Ooh.
Interesting.
So, no spoilers, but considering our schedule for later this year, you may want to send us your notes when you're done.
I'd be happy to do that. If I take any, I want you to know.
Right. Yes.
No, I have my friend is a lawyer, so we are collabing on the research.
Amazing.
Love it.
That's going to be great. Patrick, what about you?
Yes, I have a YouTube channel that I would like to plug, which you can just search my name, youtube.com/Patrick Muslek, or you can just search for Patrick Muslek on YouTube, and my videos will pop up. You can also search for Audio Engineer Reacts, and that will bring you to my channel where I've been doing full album reactions and single song reactions for the last 3 years or so on YouTube. And if you're a fan of metal music and Metallica, especially, I have lots of great Metallica content because I listened to their entire catalog for the first time last year with 2 other fans of Metallica, and those are really great videos. But I also have a few Harry Potter videos on there. And I also want to just shout out, because we don't do it very much, I have been the editor of Alohomora for 13 years, so I want to say go listen to Alohomora as well. I would imagine a lot of the Three Broomsticks listeners already do that and are fans. But like I told before Irvin got on the show, Irvin, I mentioned that I feel like this is almost like a DC and Marvel thing happening here. I am the editor of both shows. So I just want to shout out Alohomora as well and say check that out. Check out my YouTube channel if you want some awesome music stuff. Since I've started a new project recently where every day, mostly every day, I miss a couple, but every day I just post a short to YouTube recommending an album to listen to from a random band or something that I listened to that day while I was in the hospital or whatever. I've started doing this since I got my leukemia diagnosis, and a lot of people are starting to like those videos. So I'll recommend an album from all different genres of music. I've done Black Keys, NSYNC, a cool Russian metal band I found the other day called Digimortal, all sorts of cool things that I just find around. And so if you want a cool album recommendation every day, you can check out my YouTube channel for that.
Awesome. And we just want to thank once again Shruka for buying us this round of drinks.
Yes.
Shruka, thank you so much.
You.
Woo. This round of ambrosia was excellent.
Yes.
Listeners, if you'd like to buy us the next round, please head on over to patreon.com/3broomsticks with the numeral 3 to sign up. We have lots of bonus content. When we're not making 2-for-1 episodes, we are making lots of bonus discussions, for example. And you can also help us out by rating us, reviewing us on wherever you listen to podcasts. And telling your friends all about the show. If you have friends who are really big Percy Jackson fans, this might be a good one to point them towards. Word of mouth is a huge help, and we really appreciate it.
And I want to say, too, one of the reasons we ask people to rate the episodes is because the ratings help us show up when people just search for Harry Potter podcasts and stuff. If you just type in Harry Potter podcast in Google, one of the algorithms that they look at the most for that is episode reviews, individual and also show reviews on iTunes or wherever you can rate the episodes. So that's one of the reasons we ask people to do that. It's not just a nebulous thing we ask for. It actually does help us show up more in search engines and just be more present online. So if you're willing to do that, we would greatly appreciate those reviews.
And if you are trying to find us online, we are all over the social medias. You can find us on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook. TikTok is currently on hold because they're being mean. Our assorted handles and our email address can be found in the episode description or on our website. And our website is 3broomstickspod.com. That's with the 3 spelled out, THREE. There you can find not only all of our social media, but also links to any of the things that we have mentioned, music. You can submit a topic. You can let us know your thoughts. We just love to hear from you.
Yeah. So next time we meet at the 3 Broomsticks, well, we, the 4 of us right now, are just going to keep talking Percy Jackson. But listeners, the next time we meet with you at the 3 Broomsticks, we're going to be discussing Chamber of Secrets, Chapter 16, The Chamber of Secrets, which begins a fun series that we are going to be doing in 2024, where we discuss the title chapters throughout the books. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And with that, I've been Irvin.
I've been Sierra. And thank you for listening. See you next time at the 3 Broomsticks.
Cheers!
Give me big old buckets of butter beer. Give me big old barrels of butter beer. Give me the drink I love so dear. And another round for my friend right here of the sweet old butter beer.
This episode of The 3 Broomsticks was edited by Patrick Musilek. The theme song was written and performed by the Faithful Sidekicks. Make sure to check them out at thefaithfulsidekicks.com.
Whoa. Sorry.
Whoa.
What just happened?
Hold on.
What?
Are you seeing what I'm doing? Hold on. Are you seeing what
Patrick,
I'm doing?
what are you doing?
Yes.
Sorry.
Did you
I
put
thought
us
it
all
would.
in the same room?
I did. I didn't know that was
Yes.
possible. I thought I was just changing what I was seeing because I was trying to see everybody better. Sorry.
It's
Sorry.
very strange. It's very strange.
Okay, I'm sorry. That
Talk
was
about the cutout.
that is my bad.
Remember we talked about how I don't look good bald? So
Okay, I will not touch anything anymore. I promise.
Oh
Okay,
my God. How do we undo that?
wait, how do we undo it?
Or are we just going to live like this? Because
Yeah.
I'm not opposed.
I just changed mine back, so I don't know why I didn't change it for you guys.
Okay, wait,
Oh,
I'm
no.
moving it back. I think you have to manually put it back in grid mode.
Yeah, I just went to view. I didn't realize that. I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine. I didn't think it would change it
That's
for
fine.
everyone either. I was just very confused in the middle of my sentence. I was like, what?
Wait, how do I change it? I'm so confused.
In the middle.
At the top right corner, the grid view,
Okay, got it.
and not together
back.
mode.
We're back.
And we're back. And so my favorite book